Are Kirk and Chip scheduled to be together?
Kathy, are you ready? Then let's open today. Today is the ABR of Monday, October 14th. Can we have a roll call, please?
Okay. Chair Zink,
Here.
Kirk Kadeen, Scott Hopkins,
Here.
Gary Moselle, Stephanie Poole,
Here.
Howard Wittach,
Here.
and Tip Kuhn.
Right,
We have quorum.
Quorum, 2 people missing in action. Moving on to general business, item A, public comment. Anyone from the public wishing to address the board on an item not on today's agenda? Seeing none, I will go on to item B, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, which was September 30th. Do I have a first and a second? First by Howard, second by Gary. All right. Anything before item 1?
This is
This is the minutes for last meeting, which was September 30th. And you were present, so.
I have some comments on the comments of item 1.
Okay, item 1.
So, under the motion, provide additional photo documentation both to and from the nearest adjacent neighbors, I would say, and public way.
Okay.
I think that was the idea, that we would see what other people see.
Okay.
And then number 5 is a little, something's wrong there.
Board presumes.
The way I understood it is that the board requested to know if a full sound analysis will be performed by staff under CEQA, and to know if this study will require any modifications, project modifications, to comply with.
Why don't we save that as a question, because that applicant is going to be here.
Okay.
And we can clarify that, and if we'll just bring that forward as a comment.
And under 6 says study to adapt the building to provide future solar protection. I think that's already been said. I think number 6 was about additional study to adapt the building to provide future solar power generation to the
Or
building.
solar panels is a simple.
Panels is fine.
Okay.
That's all
Great.
I have.
Moving on to item 2. Any comments? I actually have 2. This is the one that was the 5 points landscaping. Item 1, it says the board prefers 24-inch minimum box trees. Should we be more specific in saying that the 24-inch box is the minimum size instead of the word prefers? Okay. The board requests 24-inch box trees. Delete the word prefers. And then the second one is item 7. I need a little help on the memory of this thing. It says add an additional parking finger along Hope Avenue and increase the landscape planner in areas where there is no viable parking available. Those are 2 things. Did we really want to add a finger and fill up that one parking where we kind of cheat a space?
I think it was a perimeter planter next to the wall that's there.
We weren't adding a finger
I
along
don't
that line.
remember that either.
Not a thing.
Exactly. So, Kathy?
Yes, I think it was.
We were adding a finger.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was at the,
it was at the
it was not on the,
It was at the
Lacumba
crosswalk.
Road.
was it on the Lacumba Road or was it on the opposite aisle? It was on either the aisle that faces Lacumba or on the facing aisle that we were
I'd
adding.
have to see the plan again.
We were adding a finger. We were requesting a finger be added.
A finger, as well as that
Because there
one little
was
cheat
a-
thing,
Right.
that retaining wall.
Right.
I recall that part. I just
Yep.
didn't remember adding a finger right here.
Yep, it was either this side or the side facing it. I'm not sure which, but we did
Because
request that.
there was a space.
There was room to do it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I'm going to say leave 7 the way it was.
Mr. Chair, Kirk was correct. That was Lacumba, not Hope Avenue.
So it would be add an additional parking finger along Lacumba
Road.
Road and increase the landscape planner in areas where there was no viable parking options. Okay.
I have
All right, Howard?
I have number 8. I would, this is not quite the way it should sound. The board appreciates the additional parking being added to the 5 Points Shopping Center area and waives the usual finger parking requirement in front of the Big 5 and CVS stores to provide additional ADA parking. I think that's why we were
It's
waiving
just-
it.
Fair enough.
I'm not going to lose sleep over that.
But, Mr. Chair,
Yes?
in that sentence, it shouldn't be finger parking, it should be finger planter.
Planters.
Finger planter.
Good point.
All these
Thank
P
you,
words
Kirk.
flowing through. Okay.
Just a little clearer,
Yeah.
Anything else?
less wordy.
That was item 2. Now moving on to item B, which was refer from the consent agenda. Any comments on those minutes? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the minutes as modified?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item C, which is the consent calendar for October 7th. Do I have a first and a second?
So moved.
First by Gary, second by
Second.
Scott.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. For our consent calendar on October 7th, we had item A, 121 Gray Avenue. Got project design approval and final approval as submitted. Item B, 813 East Anapamoose Street. Got project design approval and final approval with conditions. Item C, 3525 State Street. Got project design approval and final approval with conditions. Item D, 7 South Milpa Street. Got project design approval and final approval as submitted. Item E, 320 North Nopal Street was continued indefinitely. Consent last week was reviewed by Kirk Gradini.
Thank you, Kurt. Any other discussion on the consent calendar minutes? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And then today was October 14th, and there was no consent. It was canceled. So moving on to item D, announcements and requests by applicants. Does staff have any announcements?
Consent today.
Okay. Moving on to subcommittee reports, which there are none, active subcommittees. So moving to item 1.
Oh,
This-
Mr. Chair, I
oops.
believe Scott Hopkins would be stepping down from item 4 today.
Item on the agenda, yes.
Item 4? Yep. Okay. We are on item 1, which is 520 East Yananala Street. Welcome.
Bless.
So once we have the drawings, we can either go over the minutes and how you address them, or you can do your presentation. Either way, how would you like to proceed?
I would like to address one of the comments, if that is possible, and then turn it over for presentation.
Okay. And your name for the record, who your applicant?
Sure. My name is Lisa Arroyo. I'm from Public Works Engineering. I'm also joined today by Mr. Don Cutler. He's from CDM Smith, who is the design engineer for this project. We're here to address your comments from the September 30th meeting. And I'd like to start with the comment regarding the noise study. We are in the process of having DUDEC perform a noise study. They should be starting this week on that to address the board's comments and concerns regarding the vertical pumps and the ability to hear the noise at the adjacent property lines. That study is going to take about a week or two before we will have it finalized, but if there are any concerns about noise level at the property lines, we will get it addressed and incorporated into the project.
Okay.
With that, if it's possible, I'd like to turn it over to Don Cutler.
Do you have architectural drawings? This is a grading and paving plan.
This is what the board requested to see. I didn't bring the full set.
We were commenting about the architecture, needing to see all 4 elevations
We
and
requested
encouraging
all 4
a
elevations.
longer overhang.
That's all in the presentation as far as the 3D model.
But we don't have any actual little pieces of paper to hold in our hand? I guess not.
No,
Okay.
I'm very sorry.
So let's move on with your presentation. Let's kill the lights.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on the acoustical study that was just discussed.
Why don't you hold questions until we get
Okay.
to our part? You're up.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Board. We're continue on with the presentation that we presented last week. You'll see some slides that we did present last week just to kind of provide an overview of the project. Starting off, this is the El Estero Tertiary Filtration Upgrade Project. This project is providing Title 22 recycled water to 60 to 80 large volume users within the city. This is for both landscape irrigation as well as industrial needs. Water is a precious resource, so this is a very important project for the city to supplement potable water with the recycled water. The existing filtration facility has experienced significant amount of corrosion, which requires rehabilitation to continue to provide reliable treatment for that recycled water. There's also safety issues with the existing treatment facility that will be addressed as part of this project that to protect operator safety for that project. The project, just kind of a summary, we are going to demolish the existing 2,200 square foot granular media filter complex, constructing a new 5,600 square foot foundation for a new microfiltration system. We're also providing a pre-engineered canopy that will cover critical components of the filtration facility. One of the main reasons we've gone with a canopy as opposed to a full building is that this is a very constricted site, and that canopy provides open access for service and maintenance of the filtration equipment. I would also like to point out that to address the comment from the board last meeting in September 30th, we are going to provide provisions for solar panel. This is a pre-engineered canopy, so we are increasing the dead load for the roof to accommodate future solar panels. The El Estero wastewater treatment plant is located in the city of Santa Barbara. We're surrounded by Yananala Street to the north, Calle Cesar Chavez to the east. There's a railroad right-of-way along the south part of our site. And then Garden Street is really the main public access along the west side of our site. Between Garden Street and the El Estero plant is this industrial facility through here, and we'll provide some photos of the site from that industrial facility as part of this presentation. This is an aerial view of the existing facilities. So this is the existing granular media filter complex that's going to be removed. As you can see, the site is constrained by a main perimeter road along the west side of our site. There's also a smaller service road along the east side of our site. So we're basically landlocked by those two service roads. We have an existing solids building to the south of our filter complex. This is a sludge storage basin. An admin building for the El Estero wastewater plant is over in this area. Some photos of the existing facilities. As you can see, it's a cast-in-place concrete structure. This is the existing granular media filter complex that will be demolished. The existing solids building is to remain, and both are constructed of concrete currently. This is a view from the north looking south. This is the existing granular media filter complex with the solids building behind us. It was mentioned during our last meeting that we will need to make some improvements in this roadway through here. We will be taking out this curb and gutter and moving this roadway to the east. So we'll need to be trimming back the vegetation along the east side of that road. Would like to point out in this slide, this is an enclosure for the existing filter feed pumps. These are vertical turbine cam pumps. We'll be replacing these pumps with new vertical turbine cam pumps. So they're similar types of pumps, just located in a different area of the site. This is a view between the existing solids building to the left and the existing filter complex to the right. This is the vegetation that currently is in that area, along with the palm tree. It'll be necessary as part of this project to remove that existing vegetation as well as the palm tree. This is a site plan that we showed last time. The darker purple area, that's the footprint for the existing granular media filter. As you can see, we'll be taking a larger footprint for the foundation for the MF facility. It'll also be necessary to modify that roadway to accommodate the future pumps in this area through here. So this is a mechanical plan that shows the new MF facility on top of that foundation. Again, here are those new feed pumps that's replacing the existing feed pumps over in this corner here. Also pointing out that we are modifying that perimeter road or the access road to the east of our site, cutting into the curb on the east side and removing some of that vegetation. And then we'll be covering our process facilities with the canopy, pointing out again this canopy will be designed for future solar panels. We will not be installing the solar panels as part of this project, but we are accommodating the load for future. One of the requests from our last meeting was that we provide a grading plan. This is what Lisa handed out at the start of this presentation. So this is a grading plan that shows the foundation as well as modified curb and gutter around our site. One of the items that was presented at the last meeting was that we would be using gravel in this area to replace the existing landscaping. We had a meeting with the city last week, and plant operators indicated that they would like to have service vehicle access in and around the MF facility. So decision was made at that meeting that the gravel probably wouldn't provide good service. If it was raining, it would be difficult to drive in there. So we are proposing to replace that gravel with concrete so that we can have service access in and around that MF complex. Some additional aerials. We have some additional aerials beyond what we presented last time. Again, this is an aerial looking at a model of the MF facility from the northwest. The gravel was replaced with the concrete paving in and around the site. This is the new vertical turbine pumps. The existing vertical turbine pumps are in this area that will be removed and replaced as part of this project. Again, this is the existing solids handling building. As you can see, This solids handling building is a lot larger relative to our complex and provides good screening from the south of our site. This area along through here is the Laguna Channel. We'll provide photos further in the presentation that show views from the Laguna Channel. One of the items that came up last week was the potential for screening if there's any future development on the west side of our site. Something that we've done on other projects is provided roll-up canopies. This was a temporary facility. This was installed for 2 months as part of a pilot unit, but we put in a temporary canopy but provided these roll-up shades to screen that temporary facility. So this is something that can be provided certainly along the west side of the site where there would be potential to be seen from a neighbor. These can be added. This is a view from the northeast. So this is a view from the northeast. This is the Laguna Channel through here. This is the neighboring industrial complex. And the Garden Street is beyond the image through here. This is a view from the southeast. And this is a good shot because it really shows how well that filter complex is screened from the south end of our site. This is a very large solids handling building that does provide good screening from the south portion of our site. And a view from the southwest, again, you can see how well that solids building screens that MF facility. So we've provided some photos to address the board's comments from last week. Starting off here, again, this is the filter complex in through here. This is a view of from our site, El Estero Wastewater Plant site, looking at the Laguna Channel. So you can see through this area that it's very heavily brushed and trees, so it's very difficult to see that industrial complex to the west. You do have an open area through here, and we'll show some photos of what it looks like from that industrial complex looking on our site. But other than that, for the most part, this is very heavily brushed. So several photos from our West Permanent Road looking to the west. Again, you can see a lot of trees, a lot of brush. Provides very good screening of the wastewater plant along that Laguna Channel. So looking from the industrial complex onto our site, again, this is in the industrial complex in this area through here. Really the only areas where we could get visual of our site was through a storage area that the industrial complex is using for equipment storage right in this area. So these are some photos from that storage area. As you can see, the trees provide good screening of the facilities. This is that existing filter complex. Again, another image of that filter complex. You can see the storage of some materials in the forefront. We had to get right at the fence line to really get a good view of the plant. So here's the existing filter complex to the left, and then the solids building to the right. And another image right from the fence line that shows the filter complex. So again, to really see the El Estero plant from that industrial complex, we had to get right at that fence line to take those photos. And then public view from Garden Street. There was really only one location where we could get somewhat of an access to the site from public view, and that's at the driveway into that industrial complex. And this was something presented at last time. Between the buildings in the forefront, the industrial complex back here, and the trees along Laguna Channel, there really is no public view of the El Estero plant from Garden Street. The other area where there's potential public view is from the railroad right-of-way to the south portion of our plant. So here's the railroad right-of-way along the right corner of our screen. So we've taken some photos looking into the plant. This was a photo that was presented last time. This is that solids building in the forefront. You can see a very small sliver of that existing filter complex in behind the solids building. We've taken several photos from that railroad right-of-way just to show how well that solids building is screening that filter complex. Really very limited views from that railroad right-of-way. So at this point, I'd like to open up to any questions the board may have.
So you don't have any architectural drawings that show the 4 elevations, other than what we saw in that model?
No, we don't, sir.
Okay, and then in the minutes, we had 2 comments that weren't addressed. One of them, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, he needs the lights on, that's what it is. Was provide all 4 elevations, which we talked about, and the item 4 was study longer roof eave overhangs to provide weather and solar protection. Add more architectural character to the building. How did you address that?
One of the ways we've addressed the additional screening from the solar, from the light, is we've dropped down that roof 2 foot. So we have the eave of the canopy, and then we have a vertical drop 2 foot. We could only go 2 foot of a drop to maintain access to the equipment, and that's where we propose additional screening through a roll-up shade or screen.
So you added like a little skirt around the top.
Correct. So we have a skirt around the perimeter of that canopy.
Do you want to go to one of those slides that shows that so the board can just see that as your solution?
Kathy needs to switch the thing. Kathy?
Oops. We can wait. And then we'll go to public comments and then questions from the board.
So going back through the presentation to the 3D model, this is really the best view that shows so this is the canopy, and then we've added that skirt around the perimeter of all 4 sides of the canopy. So in this area, it's dropped down 2 foot. In this area, obviously, it's more than 2 foot.
Okay.
And that would be around the perimeter. So again, that would screen south, east, north, and west sides of the facility.
Leave that image up for a bit. Anything else for your presentation? Good.
No, sir.
I will open up public comments. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this project? Having no speaker slips, I'll close public comment and turn it back to the board for questions of the applicant. And Howard, I'll go back to you because you had a sound study question. I cut you off.
See if I can remember.
I've got a question in the meantime. Did you
Okay.
contact the neighbors across the drainage channel and show them the drawings of the project and get their feedback?
No, so we didn't show them the drawings. We went on their property. We got permission from both the owner and the tenant from where we took the pictures from. The owner's response was, I don't think we can see your plant from our property. So we kind of briefly explained it, but we did not show them any drawings.
Okay.
I remember.
You're up.
Is
Is your mic on? Oh, good. Yeah. Never mind. I'm sorry.
It's on. The acoustical study, how do you simulate the sound that is emanating from the new building without actually having the equipment there? Do you know what the noise levels are? I mean, is that a model that you do?
Yes, the specialist who will be performing the noise study will be modeling the noise. So they'll model it as it is now. Then we provided them the information on the new proposed equipment, and they will be using that to determine whether there's any impacts at the property line.
Thank you. And I have one other little question here. This is the road comes along here, and you talked extensively about moving the curb and so forth. How does that moved road get around this piece here? It seems like the road is actually, this piece projects into the road.
So we're actually modifying both the east and west sides of that curb and gutter. So we'll actually be extending the road further east into the existing planting area.
Okay.
This was overlaid, I think it was on Google Maps. So this is how the curb line is existing with our model on top of it.
Okay, so then we're seeing the existing road here. Okay.
Correct. Yes, sir.
What is the material of the shading that hangs from the roof?
This would be, so it's a pre-engineered metal building, so the framing for the structure will be steel as well as the cover and the slip. So the canopy itself and the vertical slips will all be
Metal?
painted metal. And
Corrugated?
corrugated, yes, sir. And painted to match the gray, to match the existing solids handling building. which is concrete.
Mr. Chair?
Actually, Stephanie was going to
Okay.
be next. So, thanks.
Okay.
And Gary.
What are the parts of the building that aren't covered, and why aren't they covered? Why is it necessary to cover
So we
the
have
entire thing?
we have this area to the northeast of our site. These are vertical turbine cam pumps. So these pumps are below grade. The motors are at grade, but the pumps themselves are several feet below grade inside of a can. So it's necessary if we ever have to replace those pumps to come in with equipment like a crane to pull those pumps out vertically. So that's why we left the canopy out of that area. Otherwise, it'd be necessary to remove part of that canopy to get those pumps out in the future. That's a good point to bring that up, is that one of the things we looked at as part of our project is maintaining crane access on that road as well, so we can get to those vertical turbine pumps and pull those out. So that roadway does accommodate the crane access.
And on the south side, I noticed there were some areas that was exposed on the south side. The canopy didn't cover, and the roof plan that you showed.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we have this tank here. This is a filtrate storage tank. So this is the product water from our MF facility. Because of the height of this tank, we would have had to raise the canopy probably 4 or 5 feet higher to accommodate access to the top of that tank. So it was determined that it just made sense to not cover that tank so we can maintain access without making that canopy any taller than it needs to be.
If you have anything else, I'll go to Gary.
There is existing landscaping along this south of this access road that just looks like scrub.
Along
Is
the
that-
creek?
Along the creek, yeah. Is there anything proposed to be added along that area, landscaping-wise, to screen from the neighbors or otherwise?
No, ma'am, not at this
Okay.
time.
All right.
Our intent is not to go into the creek as part of this project or along the creek bank.
Would there be implications to the creek? I'm not sure the proximity to the creek or the setbacks were involved.
Well, our intent is not to landscape the creek as part of this project and to do any of that type of work. We're staying to our project site and staying out of the creek area.
Where is the boundary between your site and the creek? Is it halfway into the creek, or is it at the edge of the creek bed?
Where's the property line?
The property line, it zigzags, kind of funny on this side. I believe. Do you have a aerial? I think that shows it better. One of the first aerials.
Is the creek, is it a man-made channel or is it a natural channel?
So actually, this is probably the best drawing that shows right through here. It looks like the property line is right at the, just inside the curb line.
It does cross Laguna Channel right around where that where it's a little bit barren. It does do a funny jog in there.
Can we put that by the...
If we don't have property lines on that side.
This is not.
Oh, yeah, that's it. That might be it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Let's go to Gary.
First, I would say I can't make a fair decision today because I really can't review the plan. So the presentation was very nice, but I don't have really a chance to review the elevations, the height limit. I have no idea. You said the tank could be 5 foot higher. There are things that I can't look at and review by just giving me the grading plan, and I thought we were pretty clear about having elevations and what we wanted on the minutes. The other question I brought up that was new was we're adding some pumps you're adding over there, and the existing pumps are there inside a shelter. and they are currently at the same depth that you will be when you have to replace those pumps and motors. Is not the access available? It's the roof opens up or something.
It's actually an open area, so there is no roof over there now. So those are pulled out vertically as well.
So they're pulled out vertically, but they've got that concrete screening all the way around them.
A concrete wall around them?
It is a short wall, though. It's about probably 3 foot tall.
But that short wall currently screens those pumps. Is that correct?
Partially screens the pumps.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't really make a fair assessment of this project, and I would like to protest to the chair that it's a little hard to do, and most applicants that would come here, we would say, we can't review. So.
I'm going to concur with that, so we won't be taking any action today. At least I wouldn't be promoting it, but we can give you feedback on what we see today and have you come back in 2 weeks. But he is correct. We are specifically wanting all 4 elevations, which are usually dimensioned with heights and such. And then if we're here for project design approval, we need a color board as well and a couple other little nuances. So, but let's continue discussing the project with what information we have. Does anybody else have questions?
I just had one question. Is the channel like a man-made concrete channel, or is it actually a natural creek?
Unfortunately, I don't have all of the history on that channel. I do know that it was restored, I believe, within the last decade or so. I can find out additional information on that.
Okay.
How it came to be, I don't know. I believe that there are, further downstream, there are some concrete portions as we get closer towards the ocean.
And then one other related question. We raised this question and got a verbal answer, a rough verbal answer last time, but the distance from, let's say, from this roadway to the other side of the creek where that fence was, where you took photographs, what is that dimension, roughly?
Guessing 70 feet. I think from the top of bank, from the creek on our side to the project is about 44, 45 feet.
Oh, to the top of bank?
From the top of bank closest to us is about 44, 45 feet to the closest area of construction.
Thank you.
I actually had 2 questions. I noticed on your grading and drainage plan, you commented that there was going to be stamped concrete. Do you have a color, a pattern? What did you mean by a stamped concrete pattern? Just curious.
This was a decision that was just discussed at our last week's meeting with the city, so we really haven't investigated that to a great level of detail at this point. It would be a natural gray color. Our preference would be not to go to stamped concrete, just to reduce the amount of cost. So our preference would be just straight concrete paving.
Okay. And then there was a fountain that was over here. Is there any history behind that fountain, like why it's located there, and like you're doing reclaimed water, so did reclaimed water go through that thing and attract the birds and stuff like that?
I'm not sure of the history of the fountain. I believe it was just brought in by somebody. I don't think there has any great history to it, but I will have an answer for you next time
Does
we
it
come in
work?
from.
Is it operating?
I think it's just sitting there.
Was it ever plumbed? Was it ever? I have no idea.
I have no
Okay.
idea. I'm speculating right now, so I'd prefer to just come back with an answer for you. That's
Okay. Let's go to comments and then we'll move on. Does anyone have any comments to jump in?
I do have comments, but go ahead, Howard, if you're ready.
Well, I'm not chomping at the bit to make comments, but I would defer to give my time to you to start it off.
Okay. Well, I think, in my view, obviously we don't have elevation, so that is an issue. But and just in terms of what I saw from the 3D imagery and the photographs, and looking more carefully now at what's occurring between the proposed new work and the adjacent neighbor, what appears to me that would be an enhancement both to the land, the creek, and to your neighbor is if you did some restoration of creek habitat in those areas adjacent to the project that would also provide screening for the project. So not just ground cover, but shrubbery and trees that would be of appropriate size to help screen your project. It doesn't seem to me, because of the distance, that it would be appropriate for us to say that there's adverse visual impacts to the neighbors, because it's quite a ways away. Certainly nothing like we encounter anywhere around town in terms of distance to adjacent properties and buildings and other uses. So, but it's not an attractive, let's say, facade, especially on that south side, which is facing the creek. It's the least attractive, perhaps, of all the facades, with all the exposed piping and tanks and so on. So I would say that some screening is appropriate, and but I think overall, that it's the utilitarian shape and configuration of the roof, the way you brought the sides down a bit to help protect and shade, and also provide some enclosure, some screened enclosure. I think that's moving in the right direction, and I think it would be acceptable to me. It seems to me it would probably be acceptable, even though we don't have elevations. My concern really was last time, as I mentioned, was what is the visual impact to the public and to the neighbor? And I think now that we've seen it, and thank you for providing the photographs, that it does seem appropriate to me to fill in some of that landscaping that's missing and it's barren, and to also screen the project. So those are my comments.
Okay. Someone else want to jump in?
I'll go next. I think I agree with Kirk on the landscaping screening. When I saw that the property line took a dip right there, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to add a few tall trees, and as Kirk said, fill in the gap. I was up at Francesca Park over the weekend, and it occurred to me that's the one spot in the city you can actually see this project. And so it does have an attractive roof on it. So the one public view is well screened. So in that sense, you've done that right. It is basically a machine. It's not really a piece of architecture aside from the roof. And so I understand that there's various factors that come into play. It's a shame that all the landscaping around, I guess that was entirely gravel before, was that right?
It was juniper.
Juniper is gone, but this is an industrial site. They've got a noble purpose of cleaning the sewage, and I think it's important to understand that function and let them do that to the best of their ability. So as long as the views from the public are screened, and I think that can be accommodated with some additional landscaping and taller trees along there, I'm okay with the project.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I just add one other thing? I don't really see any benefit to enhanced paving,
I agree.
so I'm just to throw that out. I don't think you need to incur that cost.
Thank you. Gary?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The only concern I would have is not the current use of this property, but future use of this property. And I think landscape screening would go a long way towards that. But I still see that we have a very handsome building right here, and a lot of thought from our previous architects of design of this sewer filtration plant thought well about it. It's well landscaped, it's articulated, it's a very handsome building. The pumps were screened via a screen wall, and we're going to be adding 2 more pumps, but you're changing the direction of them, is that correct? And I kind of feel like, and the whole sewer campus is like this, and the buildings are all like this throughout the campus. And I kind of feel like we shouldn't lose all of it. I think that in this area right here, we have the administration building right here. I think that where these pumps are going to be right here, we should put a small retaining wall around there. It doesn't have to go all the way to the building. It could come out to the corner. Where vehicular access is not going to be possible, I know that we're going to be craning it, but they'll be craning it from this point. At this point, they won't be going to pinch points like this, and there won't be access. I think some junipers would be nice to have there. There's parking right here and so forth. So I think that we should have some landscaping in there, especially where there's not going to be pedestrian or vehicular access all the way around here. There's not going to be pedestrian or vehicular access there. There won't be. There'll be a lot of action right here, I suppose. And the other thing is I really would like to see the elevations. I want to know how high that tank is and how high it's going to go before there. If there's a ladder above it, and the taller it gets, I don't think it's going to be as tall as this building.
That is correct.
It's going to be quite a bit smaller than that building, but I still would like to see it. And I'd like to know where the skids are going, and just be able to review this project fairly. So I'd like to know about the lighting as well. If you're going to add some lighting, or is there going to be lighting underneath the canopy, and is it going to be lit all day and all night, or what that's going to be? So there's information that we're missing, and clearly there's 110 pages of design that you have. So I'd like to see some of it.
Thank you. Anything else from that end of the table, comment-wise?
Yeah.
I'm ready to.
I just want to I don't want to add. I'm not going to add to what was already said, because I agree with what Kurt and Scott said regarding the landscaping over here. I would also recommend you study this access road and the radius of this corner to see if you can actually get a crane to make this weird corner turn.
We've definitely studied that for service vehicle access.
Yeah.
We do have crane information now, and we are looking at crane access as well. It's likely that cranes will need to be backed up into that area to remove the pumps and not execute that turn, but the plan is to provide a pocket to accommodate those cranes.
Howard, you're next, and then I'll go.
Well, okay. The existing building, most of the innards are contained in a building, and there's this landscaping around that building to create a kind of a nice object in space, and then the circulation goes around that. The new building is not that. It is not a contained, enclosed, all these pipes and all this industrial stuff is not in a building. So it almost seems like the entire area, all the surfaces around this building are industrial surfaces. They need crane access, there are trucks backing in and out, people in and out, pumps moving up and down, whatever. And so the problem of screening really falls to the edge of the property. There's almost no distinction between the service driveway and the services up against this so-called building in which you move and have to get in and out and pull things out. So I agree with the sentiment about landscaping, but I don't think putting landscaping around this building is going to serve the long-term purpose of the building. You have some planting in here, and I think you have this channel, which is, I don't know what it is. It's whether it's a channel or whether it's a parkway or whatever it is, there are little pockets that you can see through and so forth. But I think the landscaping, in other words, in order to allow this industrial complex to be what it is, it's a machine, Scott said, is to landscape the periphery. And so, although you may choose not to go there and do anything on that parcel, it almost is incumbent upon you to do so, because this gives you more freedom here to do what you need to do. all the other comments, I would like to see elevations. I would like to see how this building really is working architecturally. Materials, colors, finishes, corrugated, ribbed, whatever it is. Just give it-
I mean, I would like to add one more thing. I mean, if in fact the sound study comes back and says it's too loud, I mean, your only solution is either to contain it or to put a sound wall or some sort of barrier along this side of the property. So that would change the design significantly, and we kind of need to know that really before we see this project again.
Well, the question I was going to say is how long will it take for the sound study, do you think?
They were hoping to finish it this week, so I'm going to say next week. I think, just jumping ahead, I don't think I want a 2-week continuance. I think I'd want to go indefinite so that we can make
Okay.
sure that we have
Then that's
addressed
fine.
all of the rest of the board's comments.
Question that I was going to be, perspective that I'm taking as a board member, that this is an industrial thing and that we have to recognize that any kind of landscaping we put on here to screen it allows you to be more industrial-like. That's why gray concrete here, you don't have to go with a fancy pattern and everything, maybe slip resistant. One thing is that for your Tier 3 stormwater management, you don't have to provide water percolation, that all your water is going into a storm drain and it's being treated because you are a different type of facility. So that, even further reinforces the fact that you have hardscape everywhere around the building. The one thing about the fountain is if it has some important history, retain it somewhere on the property. If it's just, somebody got it from Uncle Joe and they decided to put it there, then it can go away. But when there's a little bit of, personal history attached to workers and, whatever it is, it's good to retain a little bit of the human side of what we're doing here or relocate it to somewhere else where they have lunch on the campus. That's what I wanted to comment on. So if someone wants to make a motion or...
I'll make a motion.
Okay, and this is going to be an indefinite continuance back to full board.
Motion would be indefinite continuance, as mentioned, and study adding additional landscaping in the buffer area between the access road and the property line to the south at the creek.
It's to the west. No, it
We've
can't
been
be
calling
right.
it south side,
It's really the west.
west
It
side.
is west side.
There's no benefit to enhanced paving on the project. The board does need to see architectural drawings to scale of the new structure and the filtration system on all 4 sides, and the heights and dimensions and parts of the adjacent buildings, we can see the relationship.
Important that you have this building and this building in the same elevation looking from that way, so you have some scale.
Those are the only comments I
And
have.
the cardboard.
Okay, does someone want to second that motion? Second by Howard. If you don't mind, person who made the motion, can we also add to provide a color board?
That's for final. We don't have project approval yet.
Oh, you don't need. And then what about
Color
exterior?
board is for final approval.
Correct. I'm
So-
hoping to have CEQA wrapped up. Well, okay.
Okay, and then just as a note, you can choose to bring in if you want to. And then to provide information about the exterior lights and to comment that dark sky compatible light fixtures are desired or requested.
Can add that.
That's all. Any other discussions? Call for a vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Indefinite continuance.
Thank you.
You can have these guys back.
Thank you.
We're moving on to item 2, which is 130 South Hope Avenue.
Hello, everybody.
Is this the first time that we've heard this project?
Yes.
I'm going to read the project description just because it's the first time. This is an installation of a 192 square foot recycling center for beverage container compaction. The facility will be manned by a part-time worker and erected in an existing parking space on the south side of a shopping center complex. Comments only. Project requires environmental assessment. Project requires environmental findings for CEQA, and project consists with the general plan. I have your name for the record and your presentation.
Jesse Velasquez with Next Cycle. Okay, about 3 months ago, Vaughn's on this property asked us to assist them in their recycling program. State mandate in 1986 has all the markets that generate more than $2 million per year to have some type of recycling facility for CRV material. And they only have three options. They, number one, can ask for an exemption, which would mean they pay $100 a day to the state, or number two, take the recycling material in the store, which they don't like to do that because they're a market, not a recycling facility, or number three, utilize somebody like our company to put a recycling facility on site to collect their CRV material for the market so that they will be in compliance with the state. The manager in the corporate office indicated that they are receiving a large amount of recyclable material and asked us to assist them. So we contacted the property manager at this facility, who is also in agreement and gave us permission to be on site. At that point, I contacted the city, Santa Barbara, to see what I needed to do in order to comply with the city rules and regulations. And that when who's Tony?
Tony's right
Oh,
over
hey,
here.
hey, Tony. That's when I spoke with Tony. And Tony said that I would have to submit an application, master's review, and I did that, and also submitted a check for $170. At that point, I received information that Elizabeth with safety and
Building and safety.
Building and safety had two concerns with our facility. And this is where I met with her today at 1, and I still think that there might be a misunderstanding. This is what we really would like to clarify tonight. She's indicating that we are not in compliance with this type of recycling facility because we are not handicap accessible, and we would have to put a ramp on our recycling center in order to be compliant, along with a handicap parking spot. The handicap parking spot probably will not be an issue. We just talked to the property manager and I already have. The issue that we have is having to purchase and put a ramp on our recycling center. She did not want to hear me say that we do not hire any handicapped people, but given the line of work that we do, there is no way that a person who would be handicapped in any way would be able to work at our facility. This container actually is a container that opens up, and inside there is a store area for our employee who has to go in and give the money to the customer and also compact the material. So she said because we have a store area, they would have to have some type of ramp because it's 6 inches off the ground. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're at that point where we have over 250 sites in the state of California, and this is the first time that someone has asked us to have our containers handicap accessible. So that's kind of where we're at right now with trying to figure out what we're going to do.
Has anyone ever asked you to put a red tile roof on one of your containers?
No,
Welcome to Santa Barbara.
Is that it? Well, again, that would probably be a lot easier than the compliance of a ramp. And she did mention that it's an ADA regulation, and we're in the process. I called my HR department and asked her to research that and see if it's federal law that has to be done. And at this point, we're researching that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
To see if he was done with his presentation.
Okay.
Anything else for you?
No, not at this point.
Mr. Chair, I have some-
Yes.
I'd like to make some staff comments.
Should I open up public comment and close it and then go to you?
Yeah.
Okay, public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to address the board? Seeing none, I'll close public comment, return it to staff, and then we'll go to Kirk.
Okay, yes. Mr. Velasquez came into town today to meet with building and safety on these accessibility code issues. So, well, we were communicating about this last week or so, and I suggested he come to the ABR while he was here in town for a concept review for two kind of the bigger questions. Y'all are aware of the La Cumbre Plaza project that's ongoing to kind of revitalize or update La Cumbre Plaza. And it'd be good to get the board's thoughts on how a project like this might fit in with that, or if it does or does not need to fit in with the plan and the aesthetics of La Cumbre Plaza.
Okay.
And the other issue is, because this is going to need a handicap parking space, I don't think the proposed location in a parallel parking space next to a drive aisle would work. I don't know if Mr. Velasquez has any other ideas, but that would be the other big question for the ABR, is where would be a good location for this.
We're actually looking now that you had mentioned that, Tony. There's you guys are familiar with the site. There's a trash enclosure or corral here. And
Show the picture.
Right here.
yeah, we're thinking of more over here because that would be a little safer for our employees. Originally, the property manager is out here, but I was by there today, and yet it's, in my opinion, dangerous for us to have a recycling center with this street, well, or whatever you want to call that, traffic here, because people will be coming around this corner as they're recycling. Over here, there's a lot more space, and it would be a lot better. So I'm in the process of talking to the property manager about allowing us to be in that area, which would prevent any danger regarding customers or our employee.
Okay. So I'm going to go turn it back to what we'll do is the board will ask you some questions, and then we'll have the board give you some comments, and then we'll make a motion and move on.
Okay.
Well, I was just trying to understand where the proposed bin was going to go, and now from your explanation, so there's going to be a full-time employee?
Yes.
Okay.
The
I
state
think you're gonna have
mandate.
I think you're going to have some issues there, just in terms of the building department approval, but I would say that that yes, definitely we are interested in having the aesthetics of whatever you're proposing fit in with the plaza,
Okay.
because there's just been an extensive remodel. We've spent hours and hours of time reviewing drawings for remodel of the plaza and different parts of it, and it's still ongoing. And just, by our standards in Santa Barbara, we don't typically allow a prefabricated
Bin.
box of this type to just be installed somewhere. It needs to fit in with our aesthetics and meet our aesthetic standards. So, I don't know what the best way to do that is.
Sorry.
I think that, it needs to go a long ways from what you're showing us here. These are plastic panels, some kind of prefabricated.
No, it's metal. It's metal.
It's metal panels.
It's a metal
painted
bin.
metal panels?
Yeah, like a container.
I just don't think it's even close to what we might consider as being appropriate.
Like screens and planters and things like that. We have done that with our bins at certain properties.
It's coming down to
How tall
almost-
is it? What is the-
It's, I think, 8 foot tall. I have it right there, 9 something.
9 feet of the ridge.
And
Yeah,
the
there you go.
footprint is, how big is the footprint?
It's 136 square feet.
So this is a small
Yeah,
utility
22 feet
building.
by 8 feet.
It's like a
takes up one
space.
parking spot.
Yeah. So it needs to meet the aesthetic guidelines. You know, we have guidelines
Sure.
that talk about what buildings should look like, and I think you really need to study those and rework the design. I think it's not really even close, really, to what would be.
Where do I find that? Is that
City has a
online?
handout, and you can get it online. Yes.
And what is it underlined
You
as?
could actually talk to Tony
Okay.
after the meeting and get that.
Okay.
Who wants to go next? Is it Stephanie?
I'll just suggest that
Can you point on the one that's over the TV camera?
the preferred location that the applicant discussed, that is an existing trash enclosure, sounds like it might be a very feasible location, but we would need to see elevations, photographs of that area, and if you're going to enhance it with walls and planting and gates and a ramp and a handicap space, then we would need to see all of that at your next presentation.
Okay.
Is it necessarily a temporary structure?
It is. It basically is a storage container where we store aluminum, plastic, and glass. And when it's full, we bring it empty, and we take that away to the recycling facility.
Pretty cool. They change them out.
Yep.
Um,
Glorified bin.
Up at the red brick
Container
tile.
bin.
Mr. Chair?
See, that's what it looks like. Just,
Yeah.
takes up one spot. Pretty nice. I mean,
Let's go with Gary and then Howard.
A couple of questions. You're indicating that this is a requirement for Vaughn's, and
Yes.
it seems to be like it couldn't be farther away from Vaughn's. And is there a reason why you've chosen this location so far away from where the recycling should be happening?
Yes, that's a very good question. Originally, we would have liked it in front here, and the property manager asked Sears, the owner of Sears, and they said absolutely not, because visibility is everything, and plus it's safety for our employee instead of being in back where we have cash, and it opens up the door for getting robbed. Then the second spot was here. I don't know if you guys can see where, yeah. But it's an enclosure right in Vaughn's, and there's really no room. Plus, it's really dangerous right here with this street here as far as traffic. So the property manager, it was a property manager idea to place us back there. They feel that that's the best place for us to be at. And we are away from Vaughn's, but of course Vaughn's would do everything they can to let the customers know that where we are.
Another question is, it seems to be taking up some parking places. Will this affect the? It seems to me that it will create some sort of parking need rather than take parking away. Is there plenty of parking at this existing facility, or is there?
Have you done a parking study, or has staff looked into that?
That was going to be our next question. Usually we go through that, and it takes up one parking spot, usually three with,
The staff reviewed it, and it's okay for this building to take up a parking space. And I also asked, depending on the ABR's desires to have landscaping, we might be able to use another parking space or two
Okay.
for landscaping.
So Lacumber Plaza Mall has a surplus of 3 or 4 parking spaces, so we can afford to lose it. Okay. I want to go to Howard and then to Scott.
Okay, I have a question first. Is this a compaction thing, right? The metal, is it metal?
What we have is a compactor that's on the side of our storefront, and we open it up. It looks like a baler, if you will, and we put our material in there, and we close it up and press a button, and it compacts the material, keeps smashing it down, and then when it's full, we pull it out and we tie it up and we put it in the bin.
Like Wally.
So
Okay,
it's not a
so-
compactor like the trash containers have,
I see.
where they push it. It's just a little compactor.
And so you said something about cash. What's the cash
Well,
all about?
The ideal thing is to have the markets allow us to provide the customer with a voucher, and then they can go into the market and cash it. But unfortunately, some markets don't allow us to do that because they don't want certain type of traffic in the store. So they want us to instead give cash. So I'm not sure yet. We haven't gotten to that point where the Swans would allow us to do a voucher or not. We would prefer that for obvious reasons, but sometimes we have to do cash.
So the building, this metal building, is a portable building?
It is.
Temporary building?
Yes.
And it houses the attendant who
Yes.
keeps the cash, and this compactor thing, whatever it is, has a door that opens to the outside, and it's basically in the building?
Yes.
It's married to the building?
Yes. Yes, it's inside the building.
And do you understand that once that building is about 80% full of all of its stuff, they bring an empty one and they swap it out?
I see.
So these are just roll-off containers?
Exactly.
Just
Roll-off.
changing them
Glorified
out
roll-off
as they
container.
need
I
them?
see.
Some-
Yeah.
I didn't understand that when I commented. That's
Yeah.
time for comments anyway.
Well,
Are we supposed to comments or
We're-
questions?
we're gonna go into-
That's my question, and then I just want to, also reaffirm that the location where it is the least preferable location. This is a better location,
Yes.
and the best location would be close to the source. Where all
It would be, but there isn't, they don't.
I understand that. Anyway,
Okay.
Yeah.
so if you could get to this one here, I would support that.
We're close to wrapping it up.
Your comments?
Should you go to comments?
Sure. I think the path to make this a successful project is you have to treat it like a cargo tail, like a dumpster almost. You have to create an enclosure around it, whether that's landscaping, whether it's decorative walls. It sits within that, and it makes it attractive and manageable. I see it as the only pathway to get this project approved. So coming back, you have to treat it, look at dumpster enclosures in Santa Barbara. Some of them are rather nice. Maybe it has a trellis on the top. You need to do something to screen this to make it acceptable for Santa Barbara, and then you can have a successful project.
It seems like,
No.
for safety reasons, that the doors or gates or whatever you have need to be considered. You said that there could be safety issues with your worker.
As
or
far
with-
as what?
Like if you have some secretive
We
behind
want
the
it to be
gates,
visible,
like-
not
yeah.
completely hidden.
Yeah.
And maybe it's landscaping, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see the need for gates at night and like in general, but, to be able to close it up and,
Right, that's what we're concerned about with an enclosure. We would prefer more of a open planters or maybe some kind of screening. But
I
still, we
see
want
that
it
there's a
open.
solution, but you need to consider all those things.
Sure,
Landscape wall.
yeah.
I would the one comment that I was going to make is our board has reviewed some temporary MRI trailers that are used at hospitals, and we require planters and things that are landscaped around it to make it look a little bit more appropriate. So we would look forward to some solutions just as he is talking.
Sure.
I think some photo documentation of
Lots.
the existing one, how the wall is, how those are screened, maybe something similar, especially if it's going to mirror it.
Or if you have to access it in a
That's a
different
brick
way.
wall, by the way. That's like
It's just like you saw with the previous project, which was a sewer treatment plant. Stand across the street and take a picture of it, and if all we see is landscaping and a tree, then we
Yeah.
know we don't see it from the public right
Okay.
away. But some photo documentation of showing how it's going to be and how it sets in and kind of nestles into the community instead of just sticking out like a
sort of thing, yeah.
rollaway. Let's wrap up with a motion.
Well, okay.
You can make a comment and then
I haven't been collecting, but I can make a motion. So, indefinite continuance to the full board with following comments that, number one, provide, wherever the bin is to be located, provide street level, pedestrian level photo documentation from all angles so that the board can evaluate the visual impact, especially from the street and also from the plaza. The board would like to see if the aesthetics of the bin are to remain as represented, then it's likely that full height, like 8-foot high walls and/or planting would be needed to screen the bin appropriately.
Okay.
I would also request that the applicant have the building department. I noticed you mentioned that you had someone at Building and Safety look at it, but I think you really need to have them do a full evaluation, because it's my understanding that you're having the public come to this bin
Yeah.
to deposit their cans and get money, and then go away with cash, right? So there's the whole public access to this building that I think could be a stumbling block, because there's many codes and regulations that apply in those cases. So I think you ought to look at that
That's what
carefully.
we're looking at right now. And,
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's my motion.
Perfect. Does someone want to second that? Second by Howard. Want to add anything else? I'm sorry to cut you off.
Sure, I understand.
Do you have anything to want to add?
Yeah,
or
I
you
just,
understand?
just for further understanding, we do not allow any customer or friend or anything except our employee to step on our container. Period. That's our policy because of liability. So, and that's what I was trying to tell Elizabeth. We are accessible, handicap accessible up to that point.
But the
What
public
we're-
still has to come to it.
They do.
Yeah, so that's the issue
And
that I
that's
think
not a problem.
might be a problem.
Okay. So we'll let you work out those logistics with the building department. We're just taking a look at the aesthetics on the outside.
Sure.
You've been in other communities where they require similar things, and Santa Barbara is going to be at that level. So with that, does everyone understand the motion? I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Indefinite continuance. Can we keep that for the
Sure,
file?
yeah, keep it.
Okay. Good presentation.
Thank you. So do I just get with Tony then and continue to?
Get with Tony, and he can give you the email links.
Okay.
It'll be fun to get it
And
in
you
and
can
out
keep
of.
these. We have one for the record.
Thank you.
In and out of it.
We are about 7 minutes late, and that happens. We are on item 3. Thank you very much. It is 3885 and 3887 State Street. This is a new project, and so I will go through the project description. This is a proposal for a new mixed-use residential and commercial building. The proposal consists of demolition of 12,000 square feet of a rear portion of an existing two-story commercial building, remodeling 22,250 square feet at the front, demolition of the existing 44,990 square foot motel, and addition of 89 apartment units with the average unit size of 806 square feet, a new 2-level subterranean parking garage with 119 parking spaces. The project proposes 63 dwelling units per acre under the average unit density program priority housing overlay. The 4-story building will be approximately 81,807 square feet and 45 feet tall. The project also includes 19 surface parking spaces, new swimming pool, new landscaping, 13,146 cubic yards of cut, grading, and the merge of 2 existing parcels. Staff hearing officer review is requested for a zoning modification for alterations to the existing non-conforming commercial building within the front setbacks. I have your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Mark Kirkhart from Design Arc Architects.
Greg Wrights with Rethink Development.
Okay. And we have staff here.
Good afternoon, Chair Zink and board members. Dan Gullett, Associate Planner, and I'll be the case planner for this project. Today it's an early concept review for the board. You should have received a memo last week that was emailed to you regarding this project. So as Chair Zink said, this project requires staff hearing officer approval from front setback modification to retain the existing portion of the building and make alterations to that portion of the building. The applicant has agreed to go through the city's pre-application review process. And the way staff sees the process for design review is their concept review today. The next step would be the pre-application review. And then the second concept review, staff would report back to ABR on the findings of the city's pre-application review. So I would encourage the ABR and any members of the public to direct any land use issues toward me, and we would explore those through the pre-application team review. So at this point, we've done a cursory plan check on the project. It appears the proposed density, building height, outdoor space, and parking number meet the new average unit density program. And we would be looking for some additional information to confirm that. As it says in the memo, transportation planning staff reviewed the parking layout and isn't supportive of the tandem parking in the underground garage. So we know some redesign of the parking would be necessary as part of this project. Two additional things I want to point out to the board. You'll see on the site plan it shows a 3.5-foot dedication along State Street, and that was provided in the former project. There's an entitled project on this site that was approved by Planning Commission in 2009 that required a dedication for conformance with the pedestrian master plan to provide a wider sidewalk and parkway for this site. So the site plan shows that, but it doesn't show the public improvements on the site plan. It shows landscaping and a retaining wall at this point. And the other thing I wanted to point out to the board is adjacent to this site on the east is the community garden for Grace Lutheran Church, and was seeking your comments on that, and I'm available for questions.
Okay. So, actually, I want to disclose that I actually talked to somebody on the telephone.
Me?
Okay, so we talked about the concept of the project and the ABR review.
I'm sorry.
It's the biggest one I've ever seen.
Yeah. Let me turn it off. It was good timing, so it didn't happen in the middle. My name is Greg Reitz. I'm with Rethink Development, and I spoke with Mr. Zink briefly about it when we were in early phases of considering whether to put the project into escrow, which is where we are now. Because the AUD was so new, felt it was important to get here as soon as possible to get a read on the project. Rethink Development, just for a little background, we were founded to focus on sustainable development. My personal background is as the Green Building Advisor for the City of Santa Monica, and in working at the city, found that a lot of developers just weren't doing enough, in my opinion, to incorporate sustainable measures in their project. So I started Rethink to do that. What we do has evolved from there to become more of a contextual development, which is not context in the sense just of architecture, which is kind of your purview, but the greater context of the city, of the environment, of social and cultural influences, all these different things that we find to shape the project. In this case, the larger issues are workforce housing and the provision thereof, and then of course sustainability and how that is going to shape the project, both in preserving existing buildings on the site, but also incorporating the kinds of things that DesignArc is well capable of, which is natural ventilation and daylighting and things like that. In that, what we have come to do a lot of is focus on workforce housing because redevelopment agencies have disappeared. There's a need to build workforce housing at a market rate and with the market forces, and so we're looking for opportunities to do this. And AUD seemed like an opportunity. However, I understand that it's a leap from what has been considered in Santa Barbara before in terms of density, which is why we want to get here as soon as possible to see if this is even possible. Even though this is completely conforming with the AUD, I want to hear as clearly as possible from the committee whether you can live with a project of this size and density. We hope that you can, because it does conform with the ordinance in every way, but we don't want to get too far down the road and lose lots of money. We'd like to get your thoughts. Mark, maybe talk about the project.
Okay. So, 2 buildings on Outer State Street. I'm not sure if you've driven by them yet, but just to kind of start on this elevation, the front State Street, is this building here is existing. And that's we're proposing, basically the only modification we need to go to the staff hearing officer is only because we propose to probably replace the storefront, enhance some of the finishes. It's in fairly, I'd say, moderate condition right now. But that's the only modification we're asking for. No setback modifications, no height modifications, no parking modifications, but just the fact that we want to touch that building, and it's currently a non-conforming setback. It's a legal non-conforming setback. That's why we have to go to the staff hearing officer. That's the only reason we're going there. So this is the portion of the new building. So we'll start on the site plan. I won't go into the details, but there's a few numbers in the staff report that were we're not demolishing a 44,000 square foot motel. I think that's the area of the site, perhaps. There's a few little numbers in there that were maybe a little bit different, but essentially what's happening is this existing building now spans over this driveway, comes back. I should go to sorry, I'll start with the existing conditions. Existing building here that spans over this driveway. There's a second floor that spans over the driveway. It's basically office tenants. There's a stairway here, there's second exit, and then another kind of an L-shaped return and another piece that spans over this driveway. This is an easement driveway that is to the benefit of the property behind here, so that they can actually drive out here, in and out, ingress and egress, and get access onto State Street. So, and then there's a little motel here, a real small little motel that's not really functioning right. 12 room motel, little motor hotel with parking in the middle. Like I said, it's a stairway here. So our proposal is to take down the back part of this building and the motel, parking back in this part of the site, and essentially build a new apartment complex in this area of the site that basically comes up and actually touches the existing building. I think it's important to note that the whole AUD program is an incentive program that was basically put in place by the City Council to encourage the development of projects just like this. It is the average unit density. We are at the higher end of the unit density, but our units could be a total of 811 square feet. Our units currently, as proposed, are 806 square feet. It's all 89 units of 2-bedroom units. So they're very small, compact units, so they're sort of affordable by design. And I think it's important to realize that, once again, this was one of the sites, along with others in the city, some of which you've looked at, that were identified as the optimal location for this kind of housing, because we're right on State Street, right on the transit line. We have a bus stop right in front, the adjacent property right here. Obviously, once someone lives here in this project, they will be able to walk to shopping, walk to entertainment. It's kind of the perfect location, really. The other thing that we think makes this maybe even more optimal than some of the other locations that were identified is that we are not in a residential area, or even a former residential area that was converted to commercial, where you have, we don't have little one-story bungalows next to us, where we kind of have a potential issue with sort of neighborhood compatibility. We have very large buildings, large shopping center, large buildings across the street, no residential anywhere in sight, essentially. So that's why we feel that this is the perfect opportunity and should really be supported as a part of this whole incentive program of the AUD. So that being said, the new building, one of the things that we're really interested in was getting a lot of perforations along this south property line, or east property line, excuse me. So rather than just having a long building at a minimal setback, we're basically carving in these very large, 3 very large courtyards, and essentially all of the private open space opens into these courtyards. There are the other bedroom windows that are along the setback, but essentially all of the open space that's usable opens into these courtyards. So the ground floor units would have the accessibility of that entire area. Upper floor units have balconies and terraces. We actually meet or exceed the open space requirements. Now, in the AUD zone, you do not have an additional open space requirement beyond the private open spaces that you provide on the terraces. You don't need to have that additional public open space. So we meet or exceed the open space that's required. So it's a double-loaded corridor along this side that is basically going to abut to the existing building. That'll become a 1-hour rated corridor. The floor levels, we're looking at 9-foot plate heights currently. We've got the section we'll show you. It's a 45-foot height limit in this area, and we can go 4 stories. Now, there are some things that are eventually going to come up, and that is the kind of outer State Street SD2 overlay kind of ideas of they're really guidelines, and really this AUD ordinance supersedes those guidelines, because those guidelines said that you could go 45 feet but a maximum of 3 stories, as I recall. But that was rewritten into the ordinance. The AUD ordinance allows 4 stories as long as you can be under 45 feet. So we're proposing a small section of the center of this building to go to 4 stories. Okay. So basically these are all stacked flats. Once again, it's a purely rental program. These are never going to be converted into condos. 806 square feet, as I mentioned, all 2-bedroom units. So, and we're not aligning the floors. It's a pure mixed-use building because we're actually attaching to the existing building, but we're not trying to sync up the floors where this common area corridor would be trying to attach to the same heights. We think that would just be a pretty big issue to try to solve and make sure that all worked out. So these are 2 stories of office space. 3 stories back to here, and I'll show you where it steps up to the 4th floor. So this is the 3rd floor. So it's 3-story, presents itself as a 3-story building on State Street next to a fairly tall 2-story building. So this portion right here is up to 4 stories. So we have there's 4 stairwells. 2 of the stairwells and the elevator go up to the 4th floor. So this portion here would be 4-story in the middle of the building. We're also proposing on the 2nd floor this common area, west-facing. So we're eliminating a couple of units here and having this kind of west-facing terrace, late afternoon sun with a pool. This is not over the parking. This is actually over grade. There are 2 driveway accesses, so we have two levels of garage. This is the lower level of garage that comes down off the back. And then the upper level on top of that with some tandem. I'd like to point out that we did this program for Greg in a little over a week. It was a charrette approach to get something in front of you as quickly as possible. We understand that there's probably some T's that need to be crossed and I's that need to be dotted on the dimensions, on the parking and so forth. We've done this before. We know we can get to that point. We know we have the ability to do that. We have enough room. These are fully excavated. They're both basically full basements. And we will certainly have a conversation by the time we're done. Tandem parking is clearly allowed in our ordinances. You just cannot assign those to different units. They have to be both assigned to a 2-bedroom unit, the 2 tandem spaces. But we'll get into those conversations with transportation and at the appropriate time. What we're really here to talk about is the massing of the building. I don't think you guys really are that worried about what's going on in subterranean garages anyway, but I just wanted to touch on that so we can kind of know where we're headed. So we've already looked at these plans. And we didn't even get to the point of developing the total floor plan, but what these little tick marks are on here is just that we've done enough of these little small rental units that this is just kind of identifying where the bedrooms would be and where the living room would be, so that we know that we have enough access to outside light and ventilation to make the plans work. And we're convinced that we can do that. And once again, in the limited time that we have to get something on your agenda, that was the approach. So here's the 2 long elevations. We've shown the 45-foot height limit on here, which is basically taking the grade and raising it up 45 feet. This is showing the existing building in elevation and the new proposal. I passed out these 3-dimensional, which as soon as we look at the elevations, we'll go through this set, because I think that this is the type of building that is best read in 3-dimension as opposed to elevation. But on this elevation, you can see here, these are the 3 deeply recessed courtyards, and so we've kind of shown those in atmospheric perspective, lightened to step them back. These We're using these kind of cowls on the corner to enclose the decks on the upper levels. You can see how we're 3 stories here, 4 stories in the middle, and then back down to 3 in the back. Excuse me. State Street elevation here. So this is the existing building, just refurbished. There's a very minor change. We're not adding any square footage. We're just kind of cleaning it up. Once again, kind of a mid-century 1960s building, and we're kind of imitating that with this, our new proposed portion here to the east. And what we've done is, because that's right on the street, it didn't seem like a very appropriate place to have balconies, outdoor living space right on the street. So if you go here, you can see what we've done is we're actually going to have this portion of the corridor be open air. It's actually high enough to get light and ventilation over the top of the commercial building. And then this portion would actually be an outside balcony, bringing you around to the entrance to this unit. So rather than this balcony is just for access to these units as opposed to a living space. Their living space balcony is back here on the back.
Can you show where that outdoor living, that balcony was here or was it here?
It's right here. There's a person standing on it. That's the 3rd floor balcony. There's another kind of walk along behind here to get out here. And then there's one that's kind of behind this. We've kind of done, and it shows better on the 3-dimensional 3D views. We're thinking it's a kind of a perforated screen there that you walk by and it becomes the guardrail for the upper floor. So you get little glimpses of light. And so you get a lot of activity on the elevation without, it's still privacy because we're going to have a gate here, a ramp and a gate so that people that want to come and go could come in right through this area right here, like to visit someone could come in through that, ride the bus, get off over here and go right in at that location and get to the whole complex, or people living there could come and go out of there as opposed to the other entrance in the back. The other entrance in the back is kind of next to the pool area. So it's right here. And once again, it shows real well on the 3D. This is there's actually guest parking, surface guest parking. We have one longitudinal section here. Apologize for not putting the dotted line on there, but it's the same as this, the long elevation. So it does fit within the 45 feet. See? Then if we go to
those?
Yeah. So image number 1 is sort of an aerial view with the big building on the corner that everyone knows. In this particular view, we have actually, Deddy was nice enough to share with us a SketchUp model of his project. So we've done some views with his proposed project that you've already seen on this model, and also some views with the existing church, just so you could see, depending on what
That's the 60-unit senior housing project.
60-unit senior housing project is going on that site where the church is currently. This is the State Street frontage again. So here's the existing building. This little box pop out is there. You want to see what it looks like on the site context photos.
They
That's
painted
right
over
there.
it.
Yep. We thought we'd paint it in color. Actually, there's some old 1960s mosaic tile on the front of that building that has been painted over. I'm not going to tell you that we're going to restore that, but I don't want to scare you guys all too much in one setting. So existing building just refurbished in the new addition. On the other aspect, there were some comments in the guidelines for Outer State Street. When we come back with a full submittal, I think we're going to maybe move this wall back and have an opportunity for some benches for the public walking on the sidewalk. Perhaps we can have the front be a little bit more accessible to the sidewalk. Here's the view from down State Street looking up with the existing church. So really the aspect of the building that you're really seeing here is 3 stories. It doesn't really pop up to 4 stories until it kind of gets behind this church, and then it steps back down. We feel that the massing really fits very well with the site, with the existing with the existing buildings in place. This is what the project would look like with the adjacent project that you guys is under review moving forward, assuming it does, so that our building is virtually invisible when that building goes in. But there are two pine trees that we're proposing to retain that are right on the site, right on the property line. They're actually on the adjacent property line to the east, but they're so close to the property line that they'll be right in the setback between the buildings, which I think will be a very natural, kind of a natural break between our project and the adjacent project to the east. And the aerial view, once again. This view, I think, shows very well these east-facing courtyards, and those will also get a lot of south light in them as well. The colors that we've chosen on this, which are very preliminary, but we're thinking there's actually, as you move up towards 5 Points, they've used a lot of Eucalyptus citradoras for the landscape and the parking lots and things like that, which are nice vertical trees, nice skyline trees. So we're thinking that those would be maybe appropriate for in these courtyards and maybe some of the surrounding trees, and that if we did that we would take the colors that we were proposing would be based on kind of the bark of eucalyptus trees. Tip knows about that. It's the same thing in front of his office. That may or may not stick for the final concept, but that's kind of the way we would approach it. Not just random colors that we happen to like, but something that works in and works with the landscape. It's just a view from standing on top of in one of those courtyards, kind of looking out through, filtered through the landscape. There's also a very large stand of trees, pine trees, on the adjacent property. Once again, they're not on our property, they're on the adjacent property that we're proposing to retain, obviously. Another stand of them over here behind that gas station. So this is the view from La Cumbre, looking up La Cumbre, I think it's Avenue or whatever, and it goes back into the shopping center. This is that gas station that I think you recently saw coming back as a commercial building that's going to be actually out on the site, closer to the sidewalk with parking behind. I think you can see from this vantage point that that building will be virtually unseen by the time you bring a building out to the sidewalk. This kind of shows how the driveway comes down. We've got surface parking, more or less where surface parking is now on the commercial building. Then it kind of gives way to a little portion where we pop out for the pool. Then there's a grade break here that drops down fairly steep to this lower level. The two driveway approaches with some additional parking here. This is the view kind of from the south looking up towards the mountains. This is that stand of existing pine trees here. And we kind of utilize these cowl ideas to kind of organize the balconies. Those also on the west side like this provide a nice opportunity for sun control because you get the side shadow instead of just a vertical shadow from a vertical projection or horizontal projection. You get the vertical one, so it casts some nice sun shadows on the side for sun control. That's a little bit of a close-up with the office building. It actually has a roof over it right now and a floor, but we're just proposing to kind of connect that together all the way around and just give it a little bit more of a concentrated. So,
Okay.
If I just conclude with one thing, and that is, I don't know if the board has seen this document, but this was a charrette that was done in support of the AUD, and some of the conclusions are you have to have reduced parking, you have to go to 4 stories, you have to have a certain mass of building to make it financially feasible to implement the AUD. And through this process, we've found that is in fact the case. So it's really important to me to hear specifically your feedback on the massing to know if a financially feasible project is possible.
Thank you. Is that all for your presentation?
Sure.
Great. I will open up public comment. I have a list of speaker slips. First one will be Debbie Piker, followed by Debbie Corvalda. If you don't mind sliding a smidgen over. Oh, he's got a mic. Never mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Detlef Pikert with Pikert RRM. I'm actually here representing Front Porch Development, the developer of the affordable housing senior project that you've seen previously, right immediately next door. And just want to say, in general, I'm very supportive of this project. I think Front Porch is as well. I think it's it's certainly a great example of what can be done with the AUD to really realize the goals of the AUD and to provide the housing in a more concentrated urban environment. So I think aesthetically, in general, I think it's a great response to the context, et cetera. I think it's a great building. The main thing I would want to just convey is our interest in the interface between the two projects in that space in between. I hope that you would encourage the applicant to work with us to make sure that balconies and windows are arranged in such a way that they maximize privacy between the two projects. I think it should be something that can be done and something that can be looked at. It wasn't clear to me what the setback is against that property line. I don't know, maybe that's a question that can be answered at some point. So, but in general, I say that we're supportive of the project.
Thank you very much. Second speaker is Debbie Corvada. Obama.
Okay. I've lived here since 1961, and I don't think this is LA or Santa Monica. And I'd like to see it. I thought first it was 3 stories. Now here it's 4, and I'm just like, I can't believe it. So that's just my personal opinion. I do work close by to this project. There is quite a bit of residential on the other side of State Street, and so I just think it's too much building in that area. I'd like to see the trees stay, and I think that's it for now.
Thank you very much for your time. Are there any other public speakers? If not, staff, are there any letters of interest? If not, I'll close public comment and return it back to the board for questions of the applicant. Actually, I'll ask a question of staff right off the bat. I'll go to this one site plan. So the way the AUD, I just want to understand how the AUD unit works. You take the overall lot and you times it by the formula of 63 dwelling units per acre, and you got your 89 units. And you chose to demolish a portion of the existing commercial. Now, they're still retaining some of this existing square footage of this commercial. If they chose to demolish this commercial, they still only have 89 units to work with?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. The density limitation is solely based on the area of the units that's privately controlled by the owner or resident of that unit. So it doesn't include common space, it doesn't include parking, underground parking, it doesn't include commercial.
Where I'm going with my leading question is that if they chose not to demolish this existing structure and they decided to keep this and this, they're still able to do 89 units with an average density of 806 units per unit. 806 units.
811, actually.
811. That is correct?
That's correct.
So it's to the advantage of having a lot with an existing building to work with and retaining that building, because this is actually retained as retail commercial space that they get the rent for, in addition to the 89 units that are elsewhere.
The retention of the commercial is allowed, and under the new growth management program, there's no small additions allowed up in Upper State Street. So the non-residential development potential actually went down with implementation of the general plan, but with the AUD, more residential is allowed up here.
So would it be unfair to the applicant who's trying to do this project and trying to pencil it out if they were to back out the square footage for this commercial structure and figure out what 63 units per acre is for the part that's basically a vacant lot, and using that as their unit count versus using the entire lot?
Mr. Chair, that's not contemplated in the average unit density program. It was known that mixed-use developments are allowed under average unit density. It's a matter of your board applying the design guidelines and finding an acceptable size, bulk, and scale of the development.
Could I ask for clarification from staff?
Yeah.
A follow-up to that? If this project wasn't in Outer State Street, if this is one of these other projects downtown here, you could build the AUD density and additional commercial on a site as long as you had the ability to with Measure E or additions to an additional building or whatever. So it doesn't preclude having mixed-use buildings on sites.
That's correct. And there's still the opportunity to transfer existing development rights amongst parcels in Outer State Street. So if some non-residential floor area was demolished up there, it could be relocated. So if the applicant had this non-residential square footage for a TEDR and it was a vacant site, they could be proposing the same project as they are today.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'll just go with my questions and I'll be done. You were saying that this is basically a 3-story building with a 4-story section in the middle.
Correct.
The lot goes down here, so in elevation, this appears to be a 4-story, or is this still, it goes down to 3?
It goes down to 3, and this basically staff has already concurred with us that these two, the parking levels are considered basements. They're enough.
There's enough subterranean?
And the very back is full subterranean, so this is really only 3 stories back here.
So if we go to that picture, I wanted to count the balconies for the view that's coming this direction. So I'm counting, is it 1, 2, 3 balconies, and then this is going down into it?
Mm-hmm.
Both levels of parking are below that bottom story.
That's correct. 3 levels.
And so how high, I'm sorry if I
Yeah,
can
no,
interject,
so how high is this finished
that
floor
was
from where asphalt is? This is about 8 to 10.
It's less, actually. It's only about 7 feet where those cars are going to kind of tuck under that last balcony. It still fits within that, and that level of parking, because it goes back underground, the definition of it is still that it's a cellar or basement.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is still 3 levels of housing above a short story right there that is a portion of that garage. You probably see it on the elevation maybe a little bit.
So the bottom level of parking is totally below grade. The upper level of parking is half, partially down.
So let's go to that one elevation since we're there. Oops.
Sorry, go ahead.
Paper cuts. So we're talking this zone right here.
Yep. That parking goes from here to back here. But there's 1, 2, 3 floors.
But the garage down below, that's still considered as 4th.
No, it's actually, enough of it is buried that it's not considered a story. You take the definition of, 50% of the perimeter is more than 6 feet, that definition. So that garage is partially submerged, and it's such that it qualifies as a basement and not a story.
So for our discussions, we can approximately say 7 feet between the asphalt and the underside of this thing?
Yeah, not a full story.
Those are my questions. Who wants to go next?
So back to that question, but visually, you cannot fit another floor because the garage is 7 feet above ground.
You couldn't put another floor anyway.
Yeah, that's right. That's why you said 3, but actually 3.5.
By definition, it's 3. It's 3 over a basement. And it's still well below the 45.
How about a daylight basement?
It's not really a daylight basement. That's not our definition, that's staff's definition.
And Jumper Kirk.
Cars go down by a ramp, or do they go by elevator?
Ramp. 2 ramps. At the back here, there's a ramp that goes down a full level, and then there's another ramp here that goes down another partial level to get to the upper level.
So I'm going to go to Kirk, and then someone can go after him.
I was, Mark, I was just looking at so we don't have a plan that shows the proposed building for the adjacent lot.
No, not now. Sorry, we do not have it at this time.
And
But,
here, that's the existing
That's
building.
existing, yeah.
Or the existing improvements.
So my question was, it looks like the setback of your building to the property line varies there. can you discuss that a little bit? What's going on along that property line in consideration you've given to the proposal that's occurring there now? And what are those setbacks and what functions are happening along there?
Sure. First of all, in this AUD ordinance, there's no required setbacks. Just right for starters. So, everybody know we actually
Look at that.
Wow. May or may not be the same scale, I'm not sure.
One's eighth and one's 10th.
So we
benefit us, or?
the closest we are is such that we can have operable windows that don't have to be protected at these. So we're 5 feet.
Along there.
And you can have a certain percentage of openings along that. So that's the closest we are. And then the balconies would get a little bit closer, but this is still, once again, up for design. The idea is we have our required balcony dimensions on the end here. So, in a perfect world, I probably wouldn't have made that quite as deep wrapping here, so we'd have a little bit more space there. But I think Denny's comment is good. We should get this together and really try to work out how we can maybe move windows so that we don't have this. We're not looking back and forth at each other. That's the idea.
Okay. The other question I had was the limitations in this driveway easement area. Are you able to provide, say, plant screening or planters along that side like we typically require for around parking and driveway
I
areas?
knew that question would come up, and the answer is no. It's an encumbered easement that runs through here. It has to be the width that it is. So we can't do. The good news is there's a nice planning where we've actually kind of shown what's on the aerial. And this is the back of that gas station back here. So
right.
Presumably a new project with the parking back here is going to have that. But the unfortunate reality is that we really can't do much. If we put a new wall there, we could probably do some very small vine pockets and grow ficus weapons on it or something like that. But we don't have the ability to put a 3 or 5 foot.
But you can't put a wall.
You can put a wall on it. There's actually a wall. There's an existing wall on it right here that holds this second floor over. And there's another one here. And there's actually a wall all along here that we intend to kind of enhance. And once again, this tree cover does a really nice job along this, but I think we would probably propose to do some vine pockets and make that into a total green wall for that very reason.
I think those are my questions.
Yeah. Can I ask some questions?
Go to Tip.
I'd like to ask some questions about the concept, the open courtyards. It seems like you have 3 courtyards. And who can access the courtyards?
On the ground floor, all the residents, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 residents on the ground floor that access that courtyard. On the upper floors, we have the balconies that look down into those courtyards.
So that means the second, the third, the fourth, just looking down to the courtyards.
That's right.
And the way you approach all the units is from the interior corridors.
That's correct.
And then everything opened up to the courtyard.
That's right. Because it's an elevator building, all of the units are required to be ADA accessible and adaptable. So that way these can actually, but down here, you could actually have some steps if the grading works out such that you could actually kind of have a little stoop on the open space on the courtyard side because their ADA access is from the back.
Yeah.
Stephanie.
What's the deal or regulation to do with the solar ordinance for AUD projects? Oh, I'm on here, sorry.
What is the regulation for the solar access ordinance for AUD projects?
Solar access?
Sorry, to go up like 19 feet and 30-degree angle over from the northernmost property line elevation.
Mr. Chair, that applies in residential zones only, and this is zone C2, so it doesn't apply here.
And this is accessible from all the way through to
Lacumber, I think it's Lacumber Lane or whatever. If you go back to
Lacumber Lane.
So that's the AT&T store.
Yeah, so if you go to the vicinity map, so here's the subject parcel, here's Lacumber, and then this is Lacumber Avenue or
Lane or road or something.
Here's the gas station right here. See, the only way to get to the back of this is from private private property. That's not a street, that's a driveway. It goes by the AT&T store.
So it doesn't have any way from these buildings here along Lacumba Road to get access onto this?
When Barry Burkus developed this,
Yes.
he granted himself an easement, which is right here. He granted himself
Okay, so,
that project.
Galleria.
The Galleria has
Okay.
access to use this as well, right
Okay.
at this location.
all right,
So that's going to remain.
okay. And how much parking is dedicated to the commercial space in this one?
It's like 36 or 37 spaces. It's 1 per 250 of remaining area.
Of course, we would have the added benefit of the overlapping use in the evenings when the offices are closed, that would be available for additional guest parking for the residents.
That's it for my questions.
Thank you.
Howard? Howard, do you have any questions?
Howard, yeah, I'll go up and then I'll go to these. Sorry.
Could you please explain what's happening on the State Street facade, both the existing legal non-conforming setback of the existing building and the proposed setbacks of your building?
Sure.
Not the eyebrow, but the face of the building. And is that a 3-story face? And is it one setback for all 3 stories?
So right now, there's going to be a 3.5-foot dedication that we're losing on the front, right in the very front right here. And then we are providing a 10-foot setback to the face of the balcony and right now it's a 13.3 setback to the face of the building. And I think that's best seen. So we're losing 2.5 feet to begin with, all the way across the front.
3.5.
Excuse me,
3.5.
The existing building is 6'3" setback from the property line, and that's going to remain. So I think maybe this view. So this is the existing building, which is at the 6'3" setback, which is remaining unchanged, and that goes up to 2 stories. And then here, we've shown a little person standing right there. This is a balcony an open air balcony that you walk to get to those units in the front. So this plane right here is the plane that is actually at the 10 feet. This plane right here. The wall behind that, which is the wall for the unit, is actually back 13 plus another. It's probably about 15 feet back to that wall, to this wall, which is a side wall of a unit. There's no bedroom windows or anything on that. It's just a walkway. So what we were proposing here, and once again we could more fully develop this, is we want this to be secure enough that people walking on the sidewalk can't just come in here and jump over this rail and go back into the project. We'd like to have that secured, so we've shown here, maybe some steps, and we probably have to develop a handicap ramp. We haven't got to that yet, but there would be an entrance point here that would have a keypad entry, so you could actually get in and go up the stairs, and or walk down and go to the elevator and go up anywhere in this building. So there's 2 points of entry, one here and one here. So, and that is up. That face is, it's 3 stories high. I mean, I think you can see that it's because this existing building is really kind of a fairly tall 2-story. The lower floor on this is like 11.5 feet or something. We're doing 9 feet, so our 3-story here is, not significantly higher than the existing building, but I think enough to have a nice break architecturally between the two.
So the proposed building is the same setback all 3 floors?
Yes.
And it has the western portion, or what is the
Eastern
block there actually is a little bit, a couple feet ahead.
Correct.
And
of the balcony, yes.
I see.
Anything else, Howard? Move on to Scott and then Gary.
I have no questions.
Okay.
My questions were along the same guise of Howard's. I'm concerned with how the front three-story portion of the building corresponds with the State Street design guidelines. If I'm correct, the State Street design guidelines ask for a two-story front facade.
Probably ask staff about that, but as I said earlier, I think the AUD, which is an ordinance, supersedes those guidelines.
I don't think
That's
they
our understanding.
supersede and they correspond with them, don't they? But they both.
Mr. Chair, the guidelines were not altered by City Council from what was approved in 2009. So there's no additional guidance that the board has other than the intent of the AUD program and knowing what incentives are provided by the AUD program.
Does that answer your question? Any other questions?
I have a question now. What's the idea of this canopy that projects from the building at the third floor and kind of frames the whole building facing north, which is, again, sort of a minimal sun exposure in any way?
Well, it's mostly for rain protection from that balcony. Would be my primary answer. Secondarily, we're basically trying to have, create some kind of harmony with the existing modern architecture, so that this is kind of a composition of similar like elements. I mean, if there's some concern on the part of the board that you'd rather see that step back more, we can't step the units back. What's very critical about this is the fact that these are stacked flats, plumbing stacks. It's all about to build apartments. It's all about that kind of economy. But we could certainly look at, some more movement in that canopy or a different way of treating that to have a little bit more of a step back. That's not something we wouldn't have a problem with that.
In the architectural treatment of the existing building, which is again a retro 60s building, are you thinking with the mind of a preservationist here, in the sense that this is now 50 years old and we're going to preserve that, or is this something that is passé and maybe needs to be updated and given a more current look?
No, we're thinking more of a preservation.
And so you want to tailor your new building to look like that?
That's correct. That's really the history of Outer State Street. My partner Bruce Bartlett was born not too many blocks from us, and he watched the whole thing being built in the 60s. So,
How old is that? Is it 60? Was it built in the 60s?
60s.
Okay, let's move to comments from the board.
Can I have one more question for staff?
All right.
What about the traffic study? Does the applicant require to do that, or what?
Mr. Chair, Transportation Planning did a preliminary look of potential traffic impacts from this project. Your board may or may not know, with the certification of the Plan Santa Barbara EIR, the City Council overrode cumulative traffic impacts for projects consistent with the general plan. So this particular project was looked at for project-specific impacts, at least preliminarily, and transportation staff does not believe this project would have project-specific impacts, but we'll do a more thorough analysis through the pre-application review.
One last question. It was discussed, the previous project that was entitled, do you recall what the overall building square footage was compared to what we're looking at today? And is there any correlation? I mean, what the square footage, because I know that before it wasn't an AUD, so they had larger units, but they had less units. So here you get twice as many units, but the units have to be smaller in size.
I brought those plans. If the board wants to see those plans, the project not counting the parking garage that's entitled on this property is about 47,000 square feet, and the proposal before you, not counting the parking garages, is about 82,000 square feet.
But those units were 2,400 square feet, some of them. And ours are 807.
But the previously approved project was, what was the square footage?
Approximately 47,000 square feet, and
this project, not including the parking, is what square footage?
about 82,000.
So this project is twice the size as the previously approved project.
Because it's an AUD.
Twice, you say? Not quite twice.
Not quite.
Not quite twice. We'll roll into comments. Does Dylan want to jump in first? If not, I will. I thought the AUD project was that we're taking what would be a large unit, and because parking is always what was governing our issues, the number of parking spaces dictate the number of units, and then we can make the units as large as we want. So if we had smaller units and just one parking space, we probably can get more units onto the site. With that, this building is twice as large as the other unit, as the other project, so that's just a fact. The comments that I want to make is, first of all, the three-story aspect of this along State Street. Visually, I think it's looking great, and it's not an issue because it's not on the mountain side of State Street. We are really concerned with projects that are on the mountain side, in which we stand on this side. We want to look at our view, and we want to see those buildings wedding cake back, or reduce that mass because we like to look at that view. On this side being the north side, architecturally, the third story aspect in my mind works and balances well. I like how you have something different here, but you relate to the street in this architecture. You're not turning your back to the street, so this is a playfulness. Another positive is the massing, in the sense that you were 3-story up to 4, down to 3. The one concern I have is the 4-story units along this end creating a very tall vertical wall here. And it's just something we just don't see yet in Santa Barbara. I mean, there might be a couple isolated things, but if I'm looking at the 4th floor, no one wants to see you lose the units because that's potential profit or potential housing units, or actually 3 less cars on the 101 freeway because we're providing them housing instead of in Ventura. But this becomes a 4-story vertical wall here and here with a pool below. So the direction that I would like to encourage is to lose these 3 units and create that kind of setback here like you have at this end and at this end. I'm not too concerned about the 4 stories here and here because of the massing of the other building and relating to the other neighbors. So it's a well-designed project. You explained yourself very well. The thing that we'll be looking at is to try to keep it Santa Barbara as much as you can, and I love the fact that you had some Santa Barbara sandstone along here. You probably got Gary's vote that way. So those kinds
like
of...
deja vu all over again, isn't it?
But you see, we never had to say it. You just actually threw in the sandstone. It's like, oh, it belongs in Santa Barbara. So, so mildly... somehow I think there's something wrong in the math, in that the fact that you get to retain so much of your commercial space and keep 89 units, and that if you chose to keep this commercial spot, you still would have had 89 units. And so we're it's our job to beat back the aggressiveness of these projects and making sure that the scale matches our community. And the massing is the concern that I have along this realm, and anything to pull this back anymore would help. And those are my comments.
Can I respond one at a time, or just hold it?
Just hold it all.
Okay, good.
I'll go next. Is that okay? I'll go next. I think this project does a lot of things very well. I like the fact that you're saving a bit of Santa Barbara history on State Street. I think it's admirable, and I think when this building is dressed up, it'll be a nice little gem. I do like the mosaic tile, by the way. The 3-story, I think here, it works okay on State Street. I think the 4-story, again, as Paul said, is in the right location. If you're going to do 4 stories, you've buried it to the interior of the site, so I think that's excellent. The density doesn't bother me. I support the AUD program. I think this is a great location for housing. As you said, it's the perfect location for housing. So I think that's all good. There are a few things that I think could use a little bit of improvement. And one is this concept of kind of turning your back to State Street with this building that's built adjacent to the building. I think that the idea of creating a screen wall is a good way to solve that problem. To me, it still feels a little closed and a little fortress-like. And maybe there's some landscaping at grade. Maybe there's more color. Or looks like there's a clear-story window up above the top there, perhaps. Something that gives it a little more life back to State Street. It feels like you're turning your back on State Street a little too much, and I'm sure it's solvable. I don't think it's a deal breaker. There are a few other areas where you've taken some liberties and pulled your balconies awfully close to the property line. I don't know if that's fair to your neighbors necessarily. I might shrink those, or the balconies are more one-sided perhaps. Quick question on the second floor.
This way.
On the other way.
Other way. Is this just a drafting error, or are the balconies really?
No, there's really just that's showing the terraces down below, and
Gotcha.
there'll actually be a fin dividing because those are two units.
Yeah, I think the general partie is very clever with the interior courtyards, and I like the notion that they're very well landscaped. Hopefully there's enough light getting down in there. On the whole, I'm supportive of the project.
Thank you.
Gary? And then we'll go to the other end.
I'll be a little opposite. I really don't think that the three-story works. I think, we need to consider human scale, and we need to consider the walkability of this part of town. And I think that rather than saying, well, we're just a little bit taller than this building, we should have said, well, we're just a little bit smaller than the existing two-story building. And rather than make everything bigger, perhaps we should have said, well, we can make this a little more diminutive than this building that's oversized. But you went the other way, and you went a little bit larger. And I have issues about the massing of this. I think there's light and air issues with how these units are going to work and how tight they are to the proposed building next door. And, I was kind of looking at some of your drawings, and I'm noticing that there's no fenestration at all on the, I guess we would call it the south side. As it comes into this building right here, it seems like there's opportunities for light and air. But I'm really concerned with how tight they are, how close the setback is, and how much landscaping and trees you have in here, 4 stories up in areas, and I have real concerns about that and the quality of life of people that will be living there. There's no real big there's a little bit of common air, but there's no real green space that's common for the applicants to enjoy or sit back, and that concerns me. Everything's hard surface. So the State Street guidelines, I think, should be adhered to a little bit more. I'm concerned with this. We're talking about the balconies, but in reality, with the building protruding all the way down almost to ground level out here, it still looks like the whole building is set forward. Even though you say the wall is back 15 feet or 16 feet, it really isn't because of so much projection that's out. And I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about this walkway being directly on the sidewalk without a landscape buffer, but you did mention that you were planning to maybe moving that back, and I'd like to see that. I'd like to see a little more, like I was saying earlier, human scale elements to it, and it does seem to be very large to me. I, for one, will be looking for reductions. So,
thank you. Howard? And we'll end with you.
I think this project is well designed it epitomizes what the AUD is really all about. It is in a good location, close to transportation, shopping, work. All those reasons are good. My thing with the AUD, I support the AUD, but I also think that there is, although that's a statute, our purview is really to make this thing have a size, bulk, and scale that's compatible, that is human scale. So there's a somewhat of an override in my mind of the AUD with our guidelines, our design guidelines. I don't know what those are yet and how they impact this project. The idea of making the two buildings kind of sympathetic to the 1960s is, I understand that, and my preference would be to make them more contemporary. They are pretty contemporary as they are, but I think that the hood that projects over State Street is a little much. It kind of overshadows. Creates a dark shadowy recess, ominous, as opposed to having a facade which is sunny and light. But I in general support this project. I have a few little areas that I think might be improved.
Stephanie, and then we'll go to...
In general, I support the project and think that it's a great location for an AUD project. Great location for an AUD project in this area of State Street in Santa Barbara. I think that I find that the State Street facade is acceptable. My concerns are with its proximity to the neighbor, and the courtyards, although a fine idea and give relief to the building, I find them somewhat diminutive, and would encourage the applicant to look for ways to have more outdoor space that's usable year-round and larger, perhaps combining some of these spaces, the pool, the courtyards in some way. That also gives relief to the facade, if possible. Those are my comments.
Tip?
In my opinion, probably the best part of this project is probably how you marry the existing building to the new building. And I think the State Street elevation is very handsome. I like the big overhang. I think it's wonderful. I also like the west elevation, which I thought is great. The parking, the driving down to the projects, and I think both units will have a lot of light coming in. But beside that, talking about the quality of life, I'm really concerned about the remaining 60, 70 units, which you group into 3 groups, about 24 units per group. And the courtyard is probably the size of pretty much fish room. And it's facing east next to Daddy's project, which is now 3-story next to it. And even though you try to work with each other and try to stagger the windows, I'm not sure how you're doing between the two projects, because he probably have about 30 units facing that way. You have about 30 facing this way. So because of that, I feel that both units, you probably don't have much light coming in at all. And not only that, how you approach the units from the corridors, and that's how you get to both units. And I'm just concerned about the quality of life for the people that are getting both units. So overall, I think it's a handsome project. The parking works, everything works, but I feel that maybe a little too dense for the neighborhood, based on what planning next door. And I think that if you can look at that and try to work on that a little bit and bring some light into those units, that'd probably be better for the project.
Yeah, I like Tip's comments. I think this, in some ways, it's a brilliant project, and I think it is a prime location, as many have commented. And I love the fact that we will that there are efforts being made now to use the AUD ordinance in a significant way to bring so much needed lower cost and rental housing to Santa Barbara. This is really the point of the AUD ordinance. So that aspect I'm thrilled about. And I also think that the design that you've chosen, the style, works well, especially with that existing building that's adjacent to it. For the most part, I like the State Street facade, the way you put a big planter in front of the building, but I think and I know you will as you develop the drawings more, that really the treatment of that street-facing facade also will be refined. I think to have 2.5 stories or whatever it is of screening there, perforated screen, needs to be something more thoughtful and more aesthetically engaging and appropriate to a street face. But the way the roof configuration works and the way it ties in with the existing building, I think that's really nice. I raised the question with the planner about the adjacent building, because I know if it's more than 50 years old, it comes under the category of historic preservation, and then you have issues with building on and adjacent to it. So you might want to check into that. I don't know if you have yet. I also think that in terms of the density, overall density, because I know that's kind of on everyone's mind in the 4-story aspect. Here's my take on it. I think that because of the way the project, the way you've chosen the 4-story element to be central to the project, I think that works well. And I'm even okay with these 3 units because of the adjacent uses and development that's there. I've been through that Galleria driveway many times. I used to frequent one of the shops in Galleria, and so I know that this is kind of a no man's land back here. And I think I don't really see these as being a problem. What I do see as being a problem is the west or the east side and the setbacks that you're proposing there, all the glass and openings and light and air that you're hoping those units will have, but in fact, because of either a 5-foot setback or in some cases, to the balcony, it's less than 2 feet, and the proposed development that's designed to go on the adjacent parcel, that's going to turn into a no man's land corridor. Too narrow, not enough landscaping in between, and it looks like if you compare it to the adjacent project, that there's generous setbacks. In fact, that was one of the things that I found that I liked very much about that project is there's more than much more than the required setback. As you mentioned, it could be 0 lot line, but instead he's got 10, sometimes 12, 15 foot and variable setbacks of the building there, so that those really become usable spaces. And I think that something like that needs to happen, if not along this entire length, for some considerable portion of it. And I don't know if that can be done by reducing the sizes of units or how that can be worked in, but I think that is, to me, that's a real issue. Because if you look at the elevations, this is where the building gets really tall and monotonous, and it's going to be facing another building that's also the repetition of units. So I think that, to me, in terms of neighborhood compatibility, which is one of our charges, is that, to me, that's a real issue with this project. But I look forward to the next design iteration. And I also, just less importantly, I think that some kind of screening along this easement driveway area needs to be considered. And of course, we need, in order to really give a proper evaluation of the elevations, we need dimensions. We need dimensioned elevations, right? And I think it is appropriate to, the next time we see this, to show in scale the proposed development adjacent, and again, plate heights and all of that. I also wonder about the feasibility of the courtyards, whether they're big enough, whether they, how much planting could really go on there, or are those just going to feel again like these narrow slots where you have to keep your windows closed, and you don't really want to go out on the balcony because the neighbor is already out there, and every time the neighbor goes out on the balcony, it's a big sound well, so that it becomes more than one person is using their balcony in the courtyard area. How does that impact the other users and that kind of thing? No real privacy out there. That's more internal user kind of question mark, which is, I don't really see that as our purview. I think part of the idea is that these would be units, affordable rental units, and the people who are living here are going to have to take into consideration the fact that they'll park on one side of the property and have to go down a 100-foot hallway or more and an elevator or stairway to get to their unit, and then have a relatively small unit that opens to a courtyard that's used by 30 other people or 20 other people, that kind of thing. I mean, that's part of the deal. But the outward impacts is something that we can evaluate, and it is under our purview. So anyway, those are my comments.
Great. Do you want to add anything before we roll it into a motion?
I think for the most part, what we heard, there's a lot of constructive ideas that I think we can move ahead with. I think we're going to spend some time with Teddy talking about these issues between the space between the buildings.
Yeah, and I just wonder, is there a process for me once I've kind of digested this, because it's not something that I normally do, it's this architect job, but I may have questions. Is there a way to get in touch with the committee or individuals on the committee to say, okay, this is what you said, does this address it, or is it all in this room?
I'm glad you asked that, and we shouldn't have conversations with you off the record. We should just keep it as a public forum. Okay. Consult with your architect, because he kind of knows what's going on in some regards, and then you just have to come back to the board, and sometimes you come back with two options. This is the one I really want, but if it fails, here's your alternative, or you can present both options saying, both of these are viable. But really, unfortunately, our job is to keep buildings small in town. Yeah. And we're supposed to show restraint in design and make sure that it's appropriate, because that's how Santa Barbara has gotten to be where it is because people before me have kept buildings small. So
I would keep buildings beautiful.
That also.
Mr. Chair, is this also a rental housing? Does not go to the Planning Commission?
That's correct.
That is correct. So story poles would not be required unless we think it's necessary.
And Mr. Chair, I wanted to mention when I come back and report on the staff's review of the project, I would be making a recommendation to ABR whether or not to refer this project to Planning Commission. It's up to ABR to refer it. The applicant's also welcome to go for a concept review before a Planning Commission on their own, but that would be an option to the board if desired.
One other comment that I would say is try not to appear too aggressive because what you're trying to do is something that's new in the AUD concept. And the upper floors have these extra clear stories of maybe 3 or 4 feet, and you go right up to the 45-foot height limit because you can, but there's no reason why the building couldn't be at 41 unless you're trying to create this little architectural bump that relates to something else that's happening here. But any type of, those are the kinds of things you zero in on it, at least for myself as a board member, to say, how can we still achieve the square footage and the concept that you want without appearing as just a massive project. So with that, if someone was taking notes to fold this into comments, this is comments only because it's going to go to the staff as part of the PRT process.
One more clarification question, if I may. Would it be possible to come back 2 weeks from now with some answers to some of the comments?
I want to check with staff on that one.
Okay.
How many times do you want them to come back before you go through the PRT?
It's really the applicant's option whether or not to go through the PRT in the first place. If the applicant wants to work on design and the board is comfortable with that, you could continue it back to the board. Ultimately, whether or not we do our PRT is up to the applicant, and what the timing of that is up to the applicant as well.
So do you want a 2-week continuance or indefinite?
Well, I don't.
Let's go for 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I'd like the option of coming back in 2 weeks if that's open.
Great. Kirk, did you have some notes there?
Not that we necessarily will, but I'd like to have that.
Not a problem.
I'll give it a shot. It's a 2-week continuance back to the full board with the following comments. I think number 1, I would actually put to consult with the city historian regarding the existing commercial building and whether or not there are preservation issues there to be considered. Overall, the board appreciates the design effort in applying the AUD ordinance to a site that appears to be very fitting for this type of development. The board has concerns about the massing and scale of the project, and we'll break it down into, say, three parts. The portion facing State Street, for the most part, seems to be appropriate. Most board members felt that the size, the height, is appropriate along State Street, but that additional work needs to be done evaluating the aesthetics of the proposed facade on that side. And the board also, of course, needs to see dimensioned elevations, especially in relation to the proposed development to the east. Some board members have concerns regarding the impacts to the proposed development along the easterly property line, and felt that the building should be set back further, and that design consideration should be made in relation to visual impacts to the neighbor, as well as the provision for additional light and air to the units that are proposed on the adjacent parcel. Study possibilities or options for screening along the easterly property line at the easement, driveway easement.
That would be westerly.
Westerly. provide additional study of the proposed courtyard areas to help the board understand that they would be functional and usable spaces for the occupants. Study adding additional landscaping wherever feasible. That's all I've got. Anyone else want?
Okay, we need to get a second on that? Would like to
second that.
Second by Scott. You have a comment? Or
Yeah, I thought, was that clear that the majority, or at least half the people, were supportive of where the four-story portion of the building was and the kind of general massing of the building, the project?
That's a good question.
Not specific, there was issues we talked about here, but really, I heard most people say that the way the building, not everyone, but most people, that the way the building stepped up in the middle to the four-story was appropriate.
That's
Overall massing.
It's interesting because I had a concern with the 3 units along the side because this is where the pool and the drive angle. Kurt said that he had no concern by it. He was like, studied it and says, the massing is appropriate here. Do any other board members want to jump in on that topic of the four-story units and where they're located, placed on the side? Let's go with Gary.
My concern with the fourth story as well as the 3 stories is that this is such a compact site that they may have a lot of mechanical equipment on this roof, and we're going to get another half a story on this roof in order to handle all of this heat gain, air, exhaust, and
we never talked about that
control.
issue.
And it's not indicated on that, and I don't see any shafts or anything area for mechanical in the basic design of the building. So I think there's going to be some issues with some height gain there.
Solar collector, there's going to be solar collectors on the building. It's going to be a common hot water
4-pipe system.
Or 3-pipe. It's going to be a common system. It's not going to be individual water heaters in each unit, so we're not going to have a million things coming out of the roof. Yes, we have to ventilate the garages. We're very sensitive about that too. And certainly with the developers' kind of core values is this is going to be a sustainable project with solar collectors for hot water and electrical and everything else.
Let's move on. Someone over here.
I think that the issue about the 4-story, I really don't think it's an issue because at least all the unit in the 4 stories will get plenty of light coming down. My concern with the second, the third, and the first.
In these courtyards themselves.
Right.
Yeah, so it's... we take a look at that and see the setback and how you can bring light into the courtyard. But the massing, 4-story fine. If it's probably both the best unit in the whole complex. Just the quality of life for the people who lives in the complex, which I feel is very important.
So there was a brief comment, I think maybe Kurt was mentioning, I don't know, it was quality of life. And I'm looking at the plan here, and I'm sorry, maybe you should have mentioned this earlier. These very long corridors between units here. 100 feet long, 40-foot dead-end corridors. Some of these things may not fly with the building department, and also they're in all the sociological studies that I have read about apartment buildings, 100-foot long corridors are like places where crime happens. And so I would look to a different circulation method, maybe a vertical circulation method, so that you could capture the space and put it into living space and have less circulation space, but have it more vertical. I don't know if that's possible. The other thing about quality of life is the ratio of height to depth of these courtyards. It's just basically, the mouth of the courtyard is 26 feet. These are 40 feet high. So it's more like a canyon than it is really a courtyard.
Yeah.
So those are just little, look nice on paper, but it's in terms of quality of life, again, how close these people are, close proximity in these courtyards. We could throw fruit back and forth between units and food if we wanted to. Well, that brings people together, I know.
There you go. Community building.
Anyway, that's just the quality of life element I thought was a good comment that should be part of the motion.
We can add that some board members have concerns about the long corridors for access, and we already have a comment about the courtyard, so I think we'll just leave that. But in regards to the 4-story portion of it, in theory, I'm not opposed to I think where it's, having it central to the site works well, but what's not working, in my view, is, again, what's happening adjacent and how, that this is a 4-story building right here. It's got a 5-foot setback to the property line, and then there's another building that's how far away? It was 10 feet away maybe, and it's also 3 stories. So maybe you've got 15 feet between buildings there, and what's happening in that 15 feet? I think that, to me, that's the issue, and where the 4th story comes into question, because the taller that is, the less usable and user-friendly that setback area becomes.
So with that, is there anything else for this motion?
Can we say that the board generally supports the 4 stories? I'd say yes.
Let's well, we could include as part of the motion that the majority of the board feels that locating the 4-story portion of the building in the middle of the project is appropriate.
Correct.
Could we also say something about maybe indicating the solar panels or the height of the solar panels and the height of the mechanical equipment in that 45-foot limit as opposed to above it?
I think that's, yes, let's add that. That provides some schematic representation of mechanical systems that would be associated with the project.
And that the mechanical systems would be underneath the 45-foot height limit.
Well, that goes without saying, right?
No.
I don't know if that's the case.
It isn't the case on the drawing right now.
The mechanical duct shafts and things don't have to be within the 45 height limit.
Right, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, the zoning ordinance regulation is mechanical equipment can exceed the 45 feet. So you can have things like mechanical equipment screening. If it's something like a parapet, though, that's considered part of the roof, and that would have to be under 45. So it depends on how it's done.
Stairways that require, when you're on a 4-story building, you have to have a stairway that accesses the roof. That's allowed as an architectural projection to go above the 45 feet.
I think you should keep those to the interior of the building roof.
They're only going to they're going to be in here anyway.
And mechanical equipment as well.
Just indicate them anyways, and then we can review them. You can still have your.
Probably should show that. If it's going to be a parapet, then you've got a different problem. It's going to be a setback screen, and it's going to be a
So people understand the motion on the table? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll see you when you are ready.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your
And
time.
we need to save one set of everything.
Snacks.
We are on item 4, which is 240 West Alamar Avenue.
Sure, I have to excuse myself at this point.
All right, are you gone for the night?
I am.
All right. Enjoy dinner.
7 days.
9, actually, including the weekend.
That's pretty good. It's quite an effort for 9 days. Nice job.
Hello, hello.
You do?
We need to go out.
We do. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I think it'll be fun. How are you?
You guys went long, so I made it.
Oh.
My grandfather celebrated his 95th birthday.
How are you today?
Today.
Where at?
At Long Beach. So I drove from Ventura to Long Beach, had lunch with him and surviving friends, and then came straight up here.
Yeah, that's a
My
it's a kind of an interesting problem to make industrial work, industrial activity.
I mean,
So I'm going to wait for Kurt to come back, at least give him another 1 minute, and then we will read the minutes of the previous meeting. All right, that was a short minute. Probably in the restroom. We'll continue. I'll introduce your team, and then do you want to do your presentation, or should we go through the minutes?
You're welcome to go through the minutes. You want to just go?
Yeah. I don't think there was anything.
There wasn't anything new. Okay. So I'm Detlef Pikert with Pikert RRM Design Group.
Bill McReynolds with City Ventures.
And Courtney Miller with CJM LA.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, board members, we're back to share with you a change that we made to the project. And I have little packets here that actually just show what the previous design looked like for reference purposes. Okay, so these, we'll use that if we need to here. So primarily, what's happened is that we had several meetings with the city staff to discuss the project, and one of the issues that they wanted us to really take a closer look at, and that's the setback from the top of the bank of the creek. You'll recall that previously we were adhering to a 25-foot setback, and there's a line on these drawings that show where that 25-foot setback is, and they really encourage us to look at that to see if we couldn't increase that setback to 35 feet. Before we go forward to the Planning Commission. So what we did was we took a look at this unit number 4, which previously extended out an additional 10 feet there, to see whether we could come up with a 3-bedroom unit that would be 2 stories in height. And so the way we approached that was to basically take out the 2-car garage that we previously had, and provide a 1-car covered garage, which you can see there, and then provide an additional parking space, which you can see over here, which is adjacent to the 3-foot setback. And that's how we were able to continue to have a 3-bedroom unit, which is very important to the developer. As you know, these are all affordable units, affordable to moderate income buyers. But we felt that we could live with the 1-car parking garage as long as we could add an additional parking space, which we were able to do, and we have sufficient room to be able to do the maneuvers to turn the car around so it comes out of the driveway front first. The unit is about, the habitable space is around 1,250 square feet. So I'll just walk you through what the floor plans look like and then the elevations. So over here you can see the ground floor plan with the living and then combined kitchen dining area, and a stair in the middle, and a little powder room as well. And then the entrance immediately adjacent to the garage there. And then one of the things that we're doing is providing some outdoor living space adjacent to that parking space. And we have a sliding patio door that provides access to that outdoor living space right there, exactly. And then on the second floor, you can see the arrangement of the 3 bedrooms, master bedroom, closet, and ensuite area, and then a second bathroom for the other 2 bedrooms adjacent to it, with a hall, stair and a hall, and the usual washer, dryer, and linen setup. That's that. So the remainder of the project has not changed, but here with the elevations, you can see how the elevations have been affected by this change. So again, I think you can see that we've maintained the overall character, the kind of contemporary styling of the building, combination of stucco massing with the clapboard siding that we have on some components of the building. And again, just kind of an aesthetic arrangement of the windows, etc. And then back here you can see how we have that patio door adjacent to the open space that now would be adjacent to the parking space. And again, just working with the arrangement of the fenestration elements, etc. I guess you can see all of the elevations there. The back elevation, same thing. The siding kind of wraps around the back, and again, kind of breaking up the mass at the rear of the building. Then the landscape plan, Courtney will talk about that.
So the changes to the landscape plan are pretty minor. The building was pulled back here, away from the setback, so we filled that area with additional native plantings. We also now have a small private open space area shown here, and that's for Unit 4. And right now the plan is to have that just be something permeable like decomposed granite. A hedge for privacy here, and then there was also a parking stall added here to accommodate this unit. And the other thing that we did, this came from out of comments from the traffic department, is we had to pull these planters back. And so if you see the light gray lines here, this is where they were before, and we had to pull them back by about 3 feet. I'm confident that we can still have small trees here, given the height of the overhang, and still have enough planting to make this space feel nicely shaded and lush. And that's it.
Thank you. Let me go through the...
I guess we still have the backyard, so that would be only comment too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that the previous unit had, it had that upper level deck, which we no longer have, but now we have this on-grade outdoor living space there.
Okay.
And they still have a backyard here as well. So, I'm sorry, and just one last comment is that, after this review and the comments that we get today, we'll be moving forward to Planning Commission hearing, and your comments will be forwarded to the Commission.
Okay. So I'm going to go through the minutes of the previous meeting, and if we want to carry some of those forward on just the way they were written, we will, and if we want to alter them, we can. So please listen, all of us, to see which ones we want to move forward. Number 1 was a majority of the board finds the proposed modification acceptable with no aesthetic impacts for the surrounding area. So there's no change to the design, and that was this whole front section?
Yes.
Okay, so that's probably going to be carried forward just as written. Number 2 is the board is evenly split regarding the supportability of the proposed cantilevers. If the board remembers, there is this cantilever that happens for the second and third floor over the garage.
5 foot.
Yes.
It's okay. Good memory. 3, the board unanimously finds the proposed third-story element was acceptable as submitted. Ununanimously? Ununanimously finds. Anonymously?
Anonymously.
Anonymously finds.
What was the unanimous thing? What was that?
It has an UN in front of it.
Yeah.
I think it's just a typo.
I think unanimous does have a U in front of it.
Okay, unanimously finds
Well, what is
third-story
it
element
that's
is acceptable.
The 3-story.
The board...
3-story in the middle.
Yes, acceptable as submitted. Compatibility considerations as follows. Some board members find the project's general basic concept, design, and detailing are well developed and compatible with the neighborhood, while other board members find that the architectural style needs further study. Applicant to return with photographs to show the 3-story design is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And that was A. B. I'm just, okay. And then, B, the board is evenly split regarding the project's mass scale, bulk, and height. C, there are no negative adverse impacts to the adjacent city landmarks. D is the design responds appropriately to the established public vistas. E, majority of the board finds the project design provides an appropriate amount of open space and landscaping. I'm just saying we can just carry all of them forward just as written, but that's just my 2 cents. So let's go to public comment, and then we'll go to the public comment. We have a speaker, Nora, I'm sorry.
It's my writing.
At least I didn't say it incorrectly this time.
No, you're just fine.
Can I have your name for the record?
Sure, it's Nora Gallagher.
Gallagher.
And I live in the neighborhood, and I'm a member of the Oak Park Neighborhood Association that's monitoring this project pretty carefully. We still have We are very much appreciative of the setback negotiation that you made. We appreciate that. We are still very concerned about the mass and scale and the 3 stories. There really aren't any buildings of 3 stories in the neighborhood except for Cottage Hospital and one medical office near the hospital and one tower of one condo near Alamar and Talent. That's really the only residential area or residential thing that could be 3 stories. So we're concerned about that in particular. We see compatibility problems. I was looking at your list. It's also, because of the 3 stories, it doesn't seem compatible with the neighborhood. The neighborhood is 2 stories at the max. Number 3, we see, again, because of the 3 stories, and because it's a fairly dense development on a very small lot, we see a problem with the bulk, the size. Number 5, it is blocking a view of the mountains from the street because of the 3 stories. And finally, I think there is, it's making use of what it can of the outdoor areas, but they're pretty small for the number of people who are going to be living there. That's our main consideration. The neighborhood is really made of small craftsman-style cottages, and I appreciated what someone said about keeping buildings small and beautiful. The other question I have really is
and then wrap it up because we have 2 minutes per speaker usually.
Right, exactly. Is the confusion over the SD2 overlay zoning. The Allied Neighborhood Association brought to our attention that it's very confusing, and I don't understand it. Perhaps you can clarify. There's a building height of 3 stories not exceeding 45 feet and not exceeding the total floor area of a 2-story building. So they understood this as the charge to the architect is to try to build the same square feet in a 2-story building if that's possible in this zone. Is that correct?
I'll let staff answer that question. If that's all for your comments.
That's it for my comments. Thank you.
If that's all, thank you for your time, and thank you for following the project. So, if you don't mind, we'll switch seats.
Yes.
For staff, is this in the SD2 overlay area of town?
Chairman Zink, yes, it is.
All right, and then she asked a question that I'm not familiar with enough.
Nor am I. I have the ordinance here, and I'll look it up, and
How
I'll get
about
back to
you
you.
just deal with that at another time?
Okay.
And
I can do that.
but staff will work on that with you. So, any other public comment? Public letters? Then I'll return it back to the board for questions of the applicant. And this is for comments to go on to the Planning Commission. Now, where are the minutes from the previous? Here they are. Okay, good.
I'm just suggesting this one, this part of it gets crossed out because that was already addressed. Sure. Asking them to bring photos.
Okay. Good job. So questions, anybody?
No question.
Tiny question. I'm looking at the perspective drawing on the first sheet, and I'm looking at the elevation drawing on sheet A4.1. I'm looking at the wooden panel between the second and third story windows in the boxes that project from the building. Are you with me on these two?
Not quite.
The wood, the wainscoting or whatever it is, those two. This is the elevation here, these
Yes.
two panels here.
At the front elevation.
Right.
Yeah.
And I very much like what I'm seeing here, which shows that there is a stout reveal setback, that the wooden panels are set back from the face of the stucco. And I just want to make sure that I'm seeing that in this elevation also, that there's going to be, this is a very stout frame here, and these are set back.
Yeah, that will be that's the intent ultimately as we develop the working
So the
plans,
wall
that we see.
thickness would reflect that.
Yes.
So then we would see that in the floor plans,
You'll
right?
see that in the floor plans ultimately.
Okay.
Because that was kind of an addition that evolved as a result of.
It is very important to the scale of the building. It's actually very nice thing to do. Thank you. That's the only question.
Any questions or comments from anybody else? Because really all we're looking at is the changes to the plan having to do with the unit number 4, losing 10 feet and changing the parking and the landscaping.
I have some comments.
Okay.
It's about the outdoor living space. I'm kind of curious because it's obviously for Unit 4, but it's not really confined. It's just kind of open. It doesn't have fencing around it. It is just DG. It's kind of like a bocce ball court out there in the middle of nowhere. The comment would be that perhaps we should have something that would delineate it a little bit more, that, stray dogs aren't going to run in there and whatnot, or children would be able to play in that area, and it would be confined to that unit. So my suggestion would be some fencing or hedging that would really delineate that open area space. That's it. And also, I don't know if DG is the best surface for something that is going to be, well, I'll leave that to you, but I think that when it rains and it gets wet and there's a door right there, that's not always the best situation.
So pavers or hard, either flagstone or pavers would be more appropriate?
Certainly coming out of that sliding door.
Maybe a portion of the area could have a hard surface right there.
You could do a pad
Yeah.
or something.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, we just want it to be permanent.
I would put my sliding glass door right here, and I would use this.
They don't want us to.
I know.
we agree with you. But
Never mind, that's another story. Okay. So if the board members understand, we can just carry forward all of the motion from the previous meeting. We'll make one doctoring change. Kathy, on item 4, letter A, the last sentence we're going to strike out because it says applicant to return with photographs to show that the 3-story design is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. They've already done this?
They did.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. So that one, and other than that, the last time we voted on it, it was 6-0, so it was unanimous. The one point that I'd make is that the board is evenly split regarding the supportability of the proposed cantilever. So that had to do with this element here. The board is still evenly split.
I was just going to say, can we talk about that for a minute? Or
The design hasn't changed.
no, it hasn't. But I was hoping to convince you that it's really. I guess I'm not understanding what the problem is. If it were a porch supported by pillars and 5 feet out from the building, it would not be. It's not a cantilever, but in a contemporary context, having a 5-foot cantilever that basically shelters the garage and the entry area, I don't see how that is objectionable. I guess I really don't. I mean, we're very comfortable when we're convinced that the future residents will be comfortable with it and perhaps even appreciate it. So I don't know if that makes any difference to anybody, but if it does, then maybe you can take another straw photo at that point. But either way, we're fine.
I was one of the 3 people that felt that the 5-foot cantilever was a little, I guess I use the word ominous all the time, but it is just overwhelming in a small space to have this block of building coming out, and two blocks of building coming out. And although I like the articulation, I like the detailing and so forth, in a small area, it just seems overwhelming. And so my sensibility is that it would be probably more relaxing, less ominous to maybe just project it 3 feet. I think the people who drive into the garage and they have a little cover and a little canopy, their cars, they drive in there, they're not going to know the difference between 3 feet and 5 feet. But that 3 feet would work architecturally. It's a little less overwhelming, and it's all about overwhelming. Just a comment.
I just sense that going up 2 stories I mean, it's one story is the garage door, and then you got the second and the third floor that I'm walking underneath, and it's dark in color, so which makes it heavier as I'm walking underneath it. That's how I sense it. And it's
I feel that you probably should bring the garage out 2 feet and take care of that problem.
Yeah, because unfortunately cutting it back makes the unit unlivable. I mean,
Yeah,
the bedrooms upstairs would be too
you might cut the
small.
turnaround space a little bit, but bring the garage out 2 more feet.
But it's only in those 2 areas. It's not the whole length
Yeah,
of
check
that
the whole, the
space.
garage and then flow too, that would be a big help.
Yeah, well, that's something we could consider. I mean, we're going to be back with in-progress set of working drawings where we'll, once we get past Planning Commission approval of this, and we will work with you, and that's a interesting suggestion that we will take a look at. It goes to City Council as well. Yeah.
Just
So
to
after that.
push back on my fellow board members, number one, it's one of the least confined areas of the driveway. There's 20-something feet to the property line. And to me, a cantilever is part of a more contemporary design. Deeper overhangs and cantilevers were certainly, if you want to call this Wrightian in terms of a facade from the street, I mean, Wright had giant cantilevers on some of his buildings. Falling water being a classic example. So to me, 5 feet is not a problem. I do appreciate Howard's comment regarding the articulation of that recess up on both stories and the panel in between to have those thickened walls. I think that is an important aspect to that design.
And adding on to that is it's important on the important elevations to have those thickened walls at the street level and anywhere in that courtyard level and at street level. To have that stepped up quality of the thickened walls and the punched openings to give that shadow. Otherwise, it looks a little flat, the elevations in the set. But I think that it's better reflected in your three-dimensional drawings, and it's something that is going to come along in the details when we see this next.
Which gets to that issue about the recess in the doors and the windows. I do understanding about the idea of make it a little deeper for a little shadow line, but I think I could look at case by case. With modern buildings, sometimes it looks better with flush. With Spanish, you need it because that's the way the architectural style works. So it doesn't mean that you recess it on a modern building and make it look great. That's one way of seeing it too. So you're the designer.
Well, we'll come back with details of that, and we'll give it some thought for sure. But we like the idea, at least of this panel being recessed a little bit.
Is this project requiring story poles through Planning Commission? Okay.
So I was the third vote on that, and actually I think that given the design style of this building, which I wasn't in favor of the design style of the building, but given the design style, I think the cantilevers would be acceptable. So I'm going to take away my third vote.
So we'll say some board members.
So it's not a split vote.
Or you could say majority vote.
What's the 5 majority?
Majority supports. So Kathy, we're going to make another change.
Happy day, thank you.
So with that, we'll call for a vote. Any other changes?
Chair Zink, it's just one last question. One other change to the project, I think it was mentioned, but I just want to restate it, that there is now a second modification for that single uncovered parking space in it. Wanted to know if the board had any concerns, not so much with the parking space, but with the any landscaping or its visual effects.
Does the board understand that in some zoning, you're not allowed to have the parking 3 feet from the property line, but in other places you can? So this is a case that you can't, and so they're putting the parking 3 feet from the property line, which requires a mod. And the reason why they have this parking space here is because they had 2 spaces, and that was just the ripple effect. So they're requesting additional mods, so we should make that a motion, add that to our motion. But I want to verify.
I would frame it in the fact that we're gaining the 10 feet of setback from the
So the
bank.
board finds the 3-foot side yard modification for the parking acceptable because of the additional 10 feet that's being gained for the Mission Creek setback. The 10 feet of landscaping along Mission Creek. Thank you for mentioning that.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
You know, actually, maybe I'd like to object to that because I think the garage looks better than a car parking in the driveway that everyone wants to look at the car. So I probably the exception to the rule of getting rid of the garage, which I think that's a mistake.
So
What if somebody moves in there with no 2 cars? Just 1 car?
Yeah, that's fine, but you have 2 cars, you know, who want to take a look at the car parking in the driveway. What happens is it doesn't move.
So do you want us to change the way the minutes are to the majority of the board, or just say the board is okay with?
Oh, what about we would put the parking on next to the building, in the flood zone?
Yeah, you're not allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to do that?
They actually, through
That's the whole point.
They got moved this way.
Oh.
So by moving it this way, the garage pooped out and slid over.
Can you have just outdoor parking? Outside?
No. In the
Can they
setback?
take that and rotate it
setback.
around?
I mean, like push it down
Yeah,
here?
right.
Yeah, into the
That
setback?
defeats the purpose of having that setback.
That would not
The
be
whole
appreciated.
purpose was to move the building footprint out of the setback, essentially moving a non-permeable surface out of that setback. And so we've gained that considerable amount of square footage back to permeable native landscape. To put parking in that area would defeat the purpose of reducing that unit.
I mean, I think that's a classic example of a little bit of a trade-off to, you know, for a greater good, shall we say. You have a car that's not ideal. I don't disagree with that, but it's one car
I think that would
parked
be an
open.
eyesore.
Well,
Another thing
if it's a nice car, it might be all right.
Another thing to consider too is we were able to pull out these planters that will somewhat screen the view of that car from the road.
So let's move on. I think if we change it to a majority of the board for that last comment, because Tip's not okay with this alteration, then thank you for expressing that. That's important to hear.
Is there a fence along that line? Property line is shown on the plans somewhere?
It's existing.
Oh, existing. 6 foot high? Okay.
Anything else? Not a call for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. You're on your way.
Thank you
We
very
just
much.
did what Congress cannot do.
Yes. And your opinion is important, even if it's a dissenting opinion. And so we are going to sign off.
Thank you.